Good afternoon and welcome. Glad to see everybody here. And it's just 1 o'clock. I'm not sure where Deputy Mayor and Councillor Alice Lutz is. We haven't heard that she wasn't coming, but if anyone knows. Yeah, maybe she's busy putting up signs. Yeah. So we may have her coming in a moment. It is Wednesday. I can't think of anything that was there. First order is always the call to order of the meeting, which is Wednesday, September 19th. It's now 1:01. It's still 1 o'clock. That's great, 1 p.m. And if there is a declaration of any potential conflict of interest or perception of bias, we'd like councillors to identify that and at the right time move along. And Councillor Shanks has already told me that there's one item that he'll want to recuse himself from. So when we get to that, remind us, or we'll remind you if we all remember. And then the adoption of the agenda as circulated. Thank you, Councillor Seegers and Councillor Wrights. Any additions or deletions from staff? Any late items from the committee members? All those in favor? That's carried, and we can move to our first delegation. Paul Kamen, please. Executive Director of the Sunshine Coast Tourism. This came up in a meeting a couple of meetings ago. It wasn't the most recent one, the one before, and we were just dealing with an oversight in terms of the room tax, and we thought it would be really useful to have you come back and speak to us again and help us clarify what the Sunshine Coast Tourism Group is doing under its new approach. So when you're ready, that's great. That's all you need to do. Thank you very much for coming.
Good morning, and thank you for taking the time to speak with me today. I'll give you a bit of a brief update. I'm here primarily to clarify our mandate and our funding for Sunshine Coast Tourism. So the handout I provided for you here shows how our local government funding works and the formula that we're working with, which we then take. So on the local government funding side, it shows all the participating governments and the funding amounts they provide to Sunshine Coast Tourism. And on the back side, it shows how we work this funding to leverage it with the provincial program, Destination BC's Cooperative Marketing Program, which I would like to make clear that it is a application process that we put together, and it is scored, and because typically the program is oversubscribed. Is it possible to get a...
Dan will get you some.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Welcome, Councillor Lutz.
So what we do, so you notice we have 3 pillars of funding. There's local government funding, there's industry funding, and then there's the MRDT or additional hotel tax funding. So we pool these amounts together and we submit an application to the Destination BC Cooperative Marketing Program, which has fairly strict criteria on what we can use the money for. Ultimately, it's for marketing. So if we're successful in our application, they score the applications 100% funded, 85% funded, and 60% funded. In the 3 years that we've applied, we've scored 100%, meaning we get the full amount that we ask for. So in the last 2 years alone, we've secured match funding from the province of $175,000, which brings our budget. We add another $25,000 so we don't double dip in certain programs. So we invest in other cooperative programs. That's where the other 25 is, which brings our marketing budget to $375,000. And I guess the important thing here, particularly when they score these applications, is that there's participation across the region. And that's what's really important here, because without participation from our local governments, the provincial funding, our score would be diminished. And so the amount of money we'd be able to get the province to put forward would be less. So we would, so it's important that we keep everyone actively engaged in the tourism file. So I recognize that were seen as part of economic development, and the Economic Development Fund was what was seen as for tourism. But I don't understand, or I was not made aware that when you funded Scredo, that our money would be coming from them. I was under the assumption that Scredo was a partner organization that we would work with on common endeavors, such as the service and leadership program that we're working on together right now. So with that, if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Yeah, in terms of your last comment, I don't think anyone was, it wasn't written in a clear accounting sense that this money was tracking over to Scredo and therefore it would flow back to you in a different way. It was all of us, it was just various assumptions and unclarified thoughts. So it's really useful for you to be here and help us with that. I understand the importance of keeping the regional participation in place for your destination marketing applications and things. I suppose there shouldn't be any reason why that couldn't flow through the Sunshine Coast Regional District, though, as an indication of full regional support, if the region acts as a region. That's, any clarifications or while Paul's here from other councillors? I have two other things I'd like to raise just for future thinking, but for now. Councillor Seegers.
Thank you. So the MRDT right now that you've qualified for is the 2%. And the timing of that was that just at that time, the province actually moved to 3%. Is there going to be any change in that?
Yes, that is ultimately a decision we need to make. It's a choice you can make. You can stay at 2% or you can opt for the 3%. And they made that extra percent, which is part of that fund goes toward what's called the Tourism Events Fund for the province. So they collect a piece of that 3% into a pool, which they then provide funding for big events that are of provincial importance. So you can find a list of the events that they've funded with that program called the TEP program, or Tourism Events Program. So it's bigger events like rugby sevens and big soccer matches and stuff that have significant economic impacts. They also do fund community events as well, particularly ones that have a long, solid track record and are sort of eligible to apply to that fund. So I could look at, certainly encourage some of our events here on the coast to apply to that program to access that. And also the 3% allows you, if it's written properly into your business plan, to address some infrastructure upgrades in regards to tourism. So the 3% gives you a little more ability to do infrastructure projects. So for instance, I believe Ucluelet and Tofino partnered to create a brand new visitor center with the extra money that they got from the 3%. So that all comes, essentially our MRDT contract is a 5-year contract and it comes due in February 2021. So we need to submit a new application at that time. So if we decide to change the business plan or business strategy, we can look at that and decide what needs to be done. And that's when I would refer back to the 10-year destination development plan that we've worked on. I believe I've submitted it to the district for review, which basically it was a deep dive in consultation with the region, which shows what our aspirations are for tourism, and it helps guide me in decision-making and what our priorities are.
Okay, so further to that 3%, if you were to look at doing that, I mean, I'd have to go back and look at the report, but if you were to do that, do you need to then go out to the community as you did the last time in establishing it to get the permission for the 3%?
Yeah, yes is the answer, but to further elaborate, there has been some changes at the provincial level in regards to short-term rentals. Starting October the 1st, short-term rentals are going to be subject to PST and MRDT tax. So what they call online platforms, the online booking platforms like Airbnb, will be collecting it on behalf of short-term rental properties and then submitting it to the government. And that fund will be, we are essentially the collecting entity, so that fund will come to us. So we will see a new funding submission to us from all the short-term rentals. The important change that they've also made is they've made that incremental fund from the online platforms available for housing projects or to help with affordable housing. And identified in our destination development plan, we have some serious issues around housing as well, particularly around staff housing. And this is an opportunity for us to address that
So
with these
that
funds.
was what I was going to raise, because it was raised with the minister at UBCM. And it's clear that that incremental amount does not have to be, it can be used for affordable housing. It's not really it's an issue that we can make, decisions that we can make at the council level. But of course, it should be made in cooperation and partnership. It's actually also, the incremental amount doesn't require an attempt to go back to square one, but you can actually use more of the 2% or the first 3% for those purposes as well. But that would require a complete, you'd have to go back to the entire partnering groups in the community at large if there was a need. And I suppose in some areas, if the need for service housing, Whistler or resort communities, you could clearly make an argument that you needed a larger portion of that for housing for workers than you do for marketing. I wouldn't say the Seashell and Sunshine Coast is right in that place now, but I think in future we have to look at that October 1st changes and have a real serious discussion about how it could flow into support for affordable housing, because I think we recognize that's a crisis.
Well, much of the change or the call for that change was driven by resort communities because they were facing the most pressure and really needed help. So, yeah.
But we're hearing it from our service industries too, and it may not be a resort community, but the restaurants and all of the service places are finding it really hard to house their workers. That was one of the issues I wanted to raise. Anything else that councillors have? The other one that I thought we should keep in mind is that our the commitment from the province on introducing a multiple MRDT tax was that that funding used for, it wasn't to replace or displace funding that was used. And we understand that quite clearly. On the other hand, it doesn't necessarily mean that the funding that governments give have to flow to the same place and in the same direction. If we kept our tourism funding at whatever it is for Seashell, 12,000 is very, very little. It flows to the Tourism Association now, but it doesn't actually have to, as long as we kept it in place and showed that it was being used for economic development and tourism. And that's something we might want to think about as a committee and as a council. And also with working with the regional district, I really think it's important to keep the regional focus in place so that you can always say that you have full regional support. But there may be other uses of that money that are still not displacing, but are part of the tourism-related activities. And I think that'll come over the next 6 or 8 months. We'll talk about that. Councillor Seegers?
So given what Mayor Milne raised, if we do not give you the money, how does that impact your budget if we keep the money here and we spend it?
That's a very good question. I don't know.
Yeah,
I would have to consult with my provincial partners and see how they would react to that. I am headed to Vancouver for an all-sector meeting for the next 2 days, and I'll be around many of my colleagues, so I will certainly raise the question and see what information I can get.
Good. We'll also obviously consult. I mean, we wouldn't do something like that arbitrarily or something, but it was, again, raised recently in discussions that were also with people from the ministry when we were talking about the other changes on this. Mm-hmm. So we're just trying to look at all ways of making sure we get the best application of the funds to all the things that we need to try and address here. Councillor Inkster.
Thank you. I think going forward, I hope that that's a fairly comprehensive discussion on our role with tourism, because I think that with economic development, with the work we're doing with Scredo, with other organizations, with this organization, local government always needs partners. Working with key, experienced people with some good expert advice in those areas so that we can harness the money, what little money we now give, considering the MRDT, in order to make some good decisions at the economic and tourism level. So I think hopefully we have a good discussion on that before some move to move us in a different direction. I wanted to ask, now that you're here, I'm not going to reflect on the comments that I made earlier that triggered your letter to the editor, because I think that was a good explanation and got the information out there to the public, as well as those that are paying attention in that area, including government officials, about what you do. So I thank you for that. But I wanted to ask about the MRDT funding. As that becomes larger and as government becomes a smaller piece, in the past, tourism organizations that had representatives from the industry very active on the boards and very active within the organizations. And they were key members of those boards, but at that point then there was a big need for local government to be involved to make sure all people in tourism industry, whether they made $10,000 a year or $1 million a year, were represented at your table. Will, as we go forward, the makeup of your board and or how you take representations from those in the industry change with the larger piece coming from the MRDT piece? If I was in the industry and I was giving more to an organization, I would probably be lobbying and or arguing for a larger input from the hospitality industry. Why wouldn't you, right? Especially if you're a large hotel in a community that knows how much you give to that organization every year, even though you didn't do it voluntarily, it had to be mandated. But I'm wondering how you see that going forward in terms of those big players.
Very good question. We actually addressed this before we implemented the MRDT, knowing that the large accommodators had a very important role to play in developing the tourism economy and the collection of the MRDT. So when we made adjustments to our board, I believe 3 years ago, we adjusted the board to have 11 members, and we have designated seats that are for the large accommodators only, both from the North Coast and from the South Coast, to ensure their representation. Furthermore, we waived all of their fees for their participation in collecting the MRDT, so they don't pay membership fees. And we also have a marketing committee that is consisted of the accommodation sector only, who we meet with quarterly to give us guidance on some of the issues that they have, particularly around affordable housing and workforce housing and training. So we get a lot of input from them for that exact reason. But we also have a broad range in our board. We have designated seats for arts and culture, designated seats for activity providers. So we have a very diverse board, and there are two open seats for at large members. That gives us a bit of flexibility. So, like I said, we anticipated that, and we made adjustments to our board to reflect that. So moving forward with the changes, I don't think we need to make any more adjustments to the board. With the renewal process, which is quite arduous, the government recognized that opening up the voting to every single participant in the program would be almost impossible, because if you consider all the short-term rentals in the community, if they give them, we have to get signed letters from every single short-term rental. That would be almost impossible. So the government capped it at the large accommodators are the only ones who will have to get signed up again for our February 2021 application.
That's good. Anything else from committee members? I noticed in the minutes that we're about to receive and look at that the committee had noted they wanted a clarification on how the district's portion impacts its provincial bodies, and I think you've done that really well. We can see that. And the other question was about a discussion with Scredo, and they're going to be up a little later, so we'll save that for then.
May I make one more
Absolutely.
comment? Just to make it clear that the province, particularly through Destination BC, has also invested significant funds to help the Sunshine Coast. the Destination Development Plan was a major investment, and since we were the first planning region, there's 20 planning regions in this process, we were the first one to complete the process. They have committed a staff person to us to help us implement an action plan over the next 3 years, so that we actually move forward on many of these larger items. So this helps us communicate with forestry, transportation, BC Ferries. So we're getting a lot of assistance from DBC that is beyond just funding dollars, but actual human resource and support and expertise across ministries.
That's really good. Does that person stay with the ministry or come and work here under your direction?
The person's name is Shauna Leung, and she is essentially the business consultant for the Vancouver Coast and Mountains region. And I've been working with Shauna for over 7 years, and she knows this region very well, and she helped create Sunshine Coast Tourism in the early days. So we have a lot of people who are looking out for us and wanting to help us in our development.
But the ministry is funding her position for 3 years.
Not 3 years, but it's a year contract so far. But
I thought I heard you say 3 years.
Well, the action plan is
Mm-hmm.
for the next 3 years. So she's helping. It's a yearly contract. It could get renewed year over year. But right now we have a person dedicated to helping us implement some of those needs.
Yeah, it was a dedication of ministry resources that I was interested in because it was quite surprising and very positive. Anything else? That's great, Paul. Thanks a lot for coming out.
Thank you for your
and
time.
helping us understand what we need to understand so we can support you appropriately and not get mixed up when we're looking at our small budget items, which we sometimes do. Next item is the adoption of the minutes from August 8th. Motion to receive and adopt. Thank you, Councillor Seegers and Councillor Lutz. Any errors or omissions in those? Seeing none, all those in favor of adoption? And is there any business arising from those that we won't get to in a moment? Okay, moving on to item 6.1, Porpoise Bay Wharf Business Plan Study, a report. First, a motion to receive the report. Thank you. And seconded by Councillor Shanks. All those in favor? That's carried. And we'd look to Mr. Curry. Give us a brief introduction, or longer.
Thank you, Chairman and Committee. My report today presents the Porpoise Bay Harbor Strategic Document in draft form. In November of 2017, the committee requested a broader report to review the Porpoise Bay opportunities, and at the direction of the committee, the staff and the district applied and received a 10,000 rural dividend grant from the province to complete the project. The report includes an analysis of potential harbor opportunities, and today we're seeking further input or direction from the committee to finalize the report. I'd like to refer to our consultant, Levi Timmermans, for a presentation of the findings from the strategic document. Levi is a harbor specialist with a background working for the federal and provincial government. At this time, I'll pass the mic over to Levi.
Thank you and welcome.
Chairman, Committee, thank you for having me. I was quite pleased when Ben asked me to present to Council. So this is a great opportunity for me as well.
Well, you get to come back to Seychelles, at least.
And the weather was fabulous, so no complaints
today,
here.
Today it was. Yeah.
It always is when I'm here.
Yeah,
so
good,
anyway.
Good.
So really what I wanted to do is provide a high-level summary of the document and really kind of fly through the key points. I'm going to make the assumption that the majority of you have actually read the document. We're at the final stages of completing it. So really wanted to touch on the high points and then hear back from Mayor and Council with respect to any questions, comments, additional input. Ben and I would like to just confirm that we've hit all of the key deliverables that are expected for the document itself. And what I'll do initially is I'll provide an overview of the methodology and the strategy I did to undertake the report. Then we'll discuss some of the next steps, and then we'll have that. It's kind of more open floor dialogue discussion time. So what we really needed to do is set the context of the actual study. So we're targeting the small craft harbor facility at Porpoise Bay Harbor. It's really structured and bound by the Harbor Authority lease that the district has with the federal government for the management of that harbor. We then took into consideration a lot of the key documents all the way from Scredo, Regional District, obviously District of Sheshelt, and took a lot of those key policy documents to help frame the contextual goals and objectives for the harbor. So how can we bring some alignment there? We took the 2010 business plan, which was a little more targeted on operations from my read of it. We took harbor information, so I had a lot of conversations with Les, the harbor manager, to kind of glean what's happening down at the harbor over the number of years. Talking with Ben and a few other key staff members, getting some input, getting financial information on a lot of things that have occurred at the harbor, providing some context to that information so that I could adjust it and actually produce something useful. And then I also brought in some more external related things, so what's happening with the commercial fishing sector, some tourism stats, those types of things, and brought those elements into the document to help come up with the options that I'm going to be presenting here shortly. So, in a nutshell, the objective that I set out in this document is really to provide the district with a roadmap for harbor development and related activities. So, what would be the things that, based on all of the contextual items and the financial situation and all those economic pieces, what would be the top, 20 things, whatever that number is, that the harbor should pursue? So, there's a multitude of things that we could do, but what are the best ones? And that's what I was trying to do with this document. So in order to do that, we had to look at what are the opportunities that are out there. So kind of do a scan of that. What are the key risks that would impact the harbor? Everything from environmental, financial, economic, demographics, those types of things. Take a look at all the key stakeholders that would have an interest in the harbor. And then take all of that information and then put it into a multiple count. And what I did with this portion of the document is thinking of a latter part of the process is there's probably going to be funding grants applied, and a lot of this information can be then populated into a business case for funding requests. So you can take a lot of this information and reuse it, not just it's a strategy, but there's actually some meat to it that you can then leverage. And what this also then does is provide the reason behind the madness. So if I'm going to say this is an option to pursue, here's the rationale behind it. And then at the end of that, I've determined what I think for the district would be the top options, ranked in priority, and then a high-level implementation strategy, and that's what we did. So I'm going to open this with a cute story with my daughter. She really would like a dog, and she would really like a horse. Now, those are both opportunities that we have as a family, except our home can't accommodate both of those things. So they're both great ideas. She may have an opportunity to get the dog, she probably doesn't have the opportunity to get the horse. So when I'm looking at Porpoise Bay Harbor, it's really these types of things that we're trying to target. So the horse is out here, the dog's in here. So just use that quick little analogy. So with this slide is, what I'm trying to show is that we've got our policy and legal context that we have to work within. We have the neighborhood and the community, the things that would be palatable to them. And then there's opportunities that don't have any constraints. And then there's the items that are really targeted to actually make that harbor sustainable. And so what we're trying to do is focus in on the efficient set of items that fall within this, okay? So all that said, here's kind of the three scenarios that we came up with. The first one was increasing vessel moorage, combined with an opportunity to sublease and partner with a float plane operator. Number two was just increase vessel moorage. Number three was expand small boat moorage, expand on your fish sales opportunities, improve your upland areas for pedestrians, and if you took the sublease of the float plane operation as its own, it kind of drops down further in the list. And then just improving customer amenities at the actual harbor site itself, okay? So one of the things that I wanted to do is saying, okay, well, that's great. You've come up with that. Well, what if we wanted to focus more on those initiatives that had more of a social or community aspect? Would that change the outcome of the recommendation? And then on the flip side, if we wanted to be much more fiscally minded, would that change the outcome of the report? So what I did is I doubled the weighting of those social and community accounts and see what it spit out. And then I did the same thing on the financial accounts. So those were the three scenarios that I presented. One was no differentiation between community and financial accounts, so kind of a good blend. And then the other two is heavier weighted on community. And then the third one is heavier weighted on just fiscal. Okay, so if we focus in on the community aspects, it was interesting. Increasing vessel moorage and the float plane operation remains the top option. And the simple fact is that we're at capacity, and increasing vessel moorage is the only way to deal with demand. So it really didn't matter from a financial perspective or a community perspective. There's a lot of synergy there. But here's where you start to see some differences. So improving pedestrian accommodation, so sidewalks through the area, viewing platforms, improving mobility and safety, customer amenities, those types of things started to have a stronger weighting. One other one that jumped out was fish sales. So this would be more like a community event. So I was kind of in my mind going, the Seashell Salmon Fest, something like that, where you could have a targeted event where you close off the whole harbor and you partner with economic development associations, Chamber of Commerce, whole host of parties where you can get everyone together and create an event that's focused on the commercial sector. And then the small boat voyage, this one actually kind of surprised me, as it reduced in priority just because the overall impact to the community was modest. It was fairly high impact to just the harbor, but the overall community didn't get that much benefit out of it. So switching gears, going to more of the financial weighting. Again, top priority was expand moorage and partner with float plane operator. This one actually increased even higher, because if there was a partnership opportunity with a float plane operator, what you likely could do is reduce your cost from engineering, because you could do shared engineering for those facilities plus your expanded moorage. There may be an opportunity to have them actually provide some of the investment for your expanded moorage. Those things could be then negotiated. But because of that, some of the more community counts dropped off because there wasn't a financial benefit. They're much more qualitative in nature versus quantitative, right? So having a fish sales event doesn't really add, per se, revenue to the harbor, but it does add a lot of community benefit. And then what we did see is if we just did a standalone expand vessel moorage, one would initially think that this should be higher in the priority from a financial perspective, but the capital cost associated is fairly high. So without a partner, this one is much more challenging from a financial perspective. However, the small boat voyage is cheap to implement, and that one wins out. So the outcome of the report is I'm recommending that a balanced approach be taken, because I believe that the fiscal position of the harbor needs to be maintained while at the same time embracing and leveraging the social and community aspects. Okay, so just to give you a few visuals of some of the options that we have here. So really, this was similar to what was presented in the 2010 report with some of the recommendations. So fundamentally is we don't want to have to reconfigure the whole harbor, because that's significantly expensive. But adding additional floats on the end of each one of your fingers would add significant additional moorage opportunities and obviously the subsequent revenue with it. And then this one shows you where your float plane dispatch center office location could be. It could be moored right adjacent to the harbor. The one issue with this one is that this area would not be made available for regular harbor moorage, but because of the partnering opportunity, you could then significantly expand the total amount available for moorage for your core business. And so that's kind of how these ones could either be done in tandem or as a one-off. Okay, so you could do the float plane by itself, you could expand the moorage by itself, or do a combo. Expanded small boat moorage, I'll just flag right in front of the pub, the marina there. You'll look on their main floats, they'll have these little finger floats that stick out. What this proposal is about, those finger floats would be roughly half the size of those for smaller boats. So right now they would accommodate, 30 plus foot vessels. This would be for smaller boats, as well as you've got lower water here. So these would be, in the 15 to 25 foot recreational pleasure craft type vessel size, and you can squeeze in a bunch more boats by doing that. So this one could be one where you just get a local contractor, get us a quote, tell us how much, and then you can implement it. Not a big significant investment, nor infrastructure required. And another interesting aspect was during peak periods, particularly in the summer, is the wharf ranger doesn't actually even park here because he wants to make spots available for customers. So during peak periods there's just not enough parking space. So what were some of the options to expand parking? And Ben and the other staff here had identified right across the street here is municipal property that could be made available for additional vehicle parking for the area. So you can end up having this as much more of a targeted place for members of the community, tourists into the community. But in order to get people down there, we have to provide amenities to serve them. So this would involve probably reconstruction of the existing sidewalks to this end of the property, and probably have angle parking along the roadway to maximize that. But again, civil engineer can come up with a good scenario for you on that. Then the next piece that's linked to that is if you go down to the harbor today, so this is the wharf head here. If you were to stand at the end of the wharf, how do you get safely out of that harbor area as a pedestrian? You're like, granted, it's not high speed, but there is no defined walking areas. You've got your kayak rental place here. You've got services over on this side. There's no ability, if you have someone who doesn't know the community, come into the dock, where the heck are they going? They have no idea that on this side they can use washrooms, there's showers. You've got the boat launch here. So one of the things that really came to the forefront is improving all of those walking amenities. And then even folks from the community who might be using the marsh area up here could access the harbor as part of their walking, right? So linking in with the greater community pedestrian network. So from what I could glean, the predominant movements would be obviously over to this area, folks walking this way to come into town, and then people just coming straight over here to walk up the other way. So one of the things that we should be looking at is how do you safely get people to navigate through the harbor. It improves the overall aesthetic of the community, consistent with the other areas in the community that have fabulous pedestrian accommodation. And we can do that here as well. So both coasts can look really good. So where we're at is we're here to get some final input from Mayor and Council. Working with Ben, we'll work at finalizing that document. Then I'll submit the final report. And then out of that, there would be an assumption that we would, the district would implement and move forward with the recommendations. And some of the key things that I think would need to happen to make that is, for any particular initiative, is who's going to be the project lead? Do we have to establish a working committee to oversee a particular initiative or initiatives? Consultation with small craft harbors, since this is technically their asset. And then some investments in engineering, design, and cost estimations. And then obviously the next stage would be doing formal project approvals and grant applications if need be. So thank you very much.
That's great, thank you. And I'm sure there'll be questions. I'll have two just to start us off. One is a bit historical. When you were doing the work, and you referred at one point to some of the wharfing coming right out of the 2010 plan, basically.
Yeah.
When you did that work, did you run across any reasons why the 2010 plan didn't go forward, or there was nothing much done with it, or there was no development on it? Or?
In my experience, it's typically is if you don't identify someone to be responsible for delivering it, like staff having it in their performance plan, it's going to be difficult to move something forward. So the other piece is you're not going to have an outside agency saying, yeah, let's go do this. So you really have to champion it. So as a local government, you need to say, this is important to us, and we're going to put the energy and efforts into doing it.
So your sense is that they did the study, it looked good, but they didn't actually take those steps of action and orientation, which of course are budget and as you say, staffing. Budget
and staffing, right? So you got to put the resources, make sure that it becomes a priority. So, you know, if staff are tasked with implementing something, then they're sort of held to task on it. Sorry, Ben.
And one more thing before we get into too much. Can you go back to the slide that showed the harbor, the float planes? And
yeah,
I want to know, I want to understand what you meant when you said it would impact. Like, would it just impact the water to the east, or would it impact all of Finger D?
So,
or could you still have boats and lots of pedestrian on Finger D?
Finger D, probably like on this portion, would end up being restricted.
The whole,
I would expect
both sides of it.
Yeah, both sides on. You would probably have a gate here, installed to restrict access. And then you'd have some vessel moorage here, but you basically, you would lose these spots, right? But if you were to partner with them saying, okay, you're cannibalizing our available berthage, we're already at a deficit, we need you to come to us with a proposal that shows that we're actually expanding the available moorage that we have. Sort of almost as like compensation for giving you access to the site.
And the extra length that's put in there, that's for taxiing, and the extra 2
So basically, yeah, you would have,
just for taxiing coming in, going
yeah,
in.
where they can moor the
But
actual
they would actually need
aircraft.
control of both sides for
Yeah.
safety.
Yeah, because you would have like the wings that would extend over.
Yeah.
Right? They could probably, so one of the other things is this would be the, I'm going to call it the float plane
Well, and
area.
that's where the boat launch is.
That's right. And
So
the float
what
planes are already
happens-
here as well, right? They're just on the other side of the boat launch. So
Okay,
it's 6
there's
half dozen or
there's
the
enough
other.
distance there?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, that was my sense, just to
Okay.
think it through. Councillor Inkster and then Councillor Mueller. And, microphone?
You asked of the consultant why that earlier plan didn't go forward, and, you know, the plans don't always come at the beginning of the year, so we had a year and a bit to implement that plan, and then an election happened. But within that year and a half, we had to look at a number of things. I mean, we did electrify, add some electrical components to the dock, and that was almost $100,000 working with the federal government. We did a number of other changes, but the plan basically wanted more fingers, as we've discussed and as I've indicated before, and that would mean some lease applications and lease change for the District of Sechelt, and budgeting for the fingers to be created, and that's a money thing, and that was over a multi-year plan to do that. So it was just more time was needed to implement that earlier plan, and just didn't
And we'll
happen.
come back to the lease.
Yeah.
That triggered some questions.
So that's why we just needed a little more time.
Good.
And I might throw another little nugget on there too, is in order to do the expansion would require the support of small craft harbors. And so there's a lot of consultative effort that's required to get them on board, right? So it's one of those things where Les goes to the Harbor Authority Association meetings, advocates on behalf of the harbor's interests, but how does this measure up against other priorities that small craft harbors has? You know, I'm going to assume like every other program that they're under-resourced from a financial perspective, the demands on their program are greater. And that's where I really feel that the champion of the local government to advance the interests of the harbor could then elevate your profile with the small craft harbor's decision-making. So if they've got their 100 list of projects and you're number 99, how do you get your project higher up, right? And so one of those things is saying, we actually want to move forward with this, and you kind of, to use the phrase, the dog with a bone on it.
Councillor Mueller.
Yeah, if we could just go, I think forward one slide was the slide I wanted to see. So in that one, that loading zone, that's obviously a high part of the wharf. So we are creating then a lower area.
Yeah, so
That's
one of the things that I was thinking is versus actually demolishing the entire wharf head, because this is all your water lot, right? And so if you look at it from a revenue perspective, you're getting nothing from it. All you're getting is maintenance costs, right? Would you actually need this wharf head for a lot of activities? From what I can observe, not really. This loading zone is required for the derrick operation, right? So a marine engineer can come up with an option that could give you small boat moorage in these locations. The idea with this is that they would actually, it would be tied in with your floats down here at the bottom of the gangway. And they would kind of go up along the side of the actual wharf head itself.
And so you could still use derrick in that
Exactly,
situation?
right? So this would be no boats. And then through some innovative design, they can say, well, a boat can tie up to the floats and still do their loading activities.
And there's no safety concern with that configuration?
I think an engineer can come up with a solution for you on that.
All right. And then my other question was, you know, we got started on this phase of this project because of multiple parking related issues. That was kind of the driver. And I'm kind of a little surprised to see that the parking improvements didn't factor right at the top of your matrix.
And the reason being is for I'd say 9 months of the year, the parking lot isn't full. It's at peak period. So it's one of those classic things of, do you build for your busiest 2 weeks? You don't do that for anything, right? You don't build your highways that are 5 lanes for that, 2-week period where they need it. And you just deal with some congestion. However, if you're going to expand moorage, there's a very strong case that there needs to be the supporting upland improvements to support it. But if I was being purely focused on the harbor, is okay, well, they could park off the street somewhere. Yeah, so it may create some issues with the residents, but there is a solution here. So,
But they can't. That's why
issue.
it
They
rose.
can't.
There's just nowhere to go.
yeah, like it's tight, right, for those peak periods, but for most of the year, it's okay.
Interesting. Anything else from committee? We want to go back to the lease, just so we don't forget
Yeah.
that. But Councillor Seegers, you might be going there as well. So,
Yeah.
So I remember a couple of years ago, Small Craft Harbors, I believe, came to us and wanted us to take over the government dock. They had planned to come to a few meetings. For whatever reason, they kept canceling, and then that went by the wayside. So they were actually looking at us to do that. So I guess my question around that, one of them is, there's talk in the community of us actually increasing our water lease so that we have more dominion, I guess you'd say, over more of the area out there and would be able to deal better with derelict vessels that are out there. How does that water lease tie into the small craft harbors and this wharf?
Well, I can comment specific to this. So I don't want to say my assignment wasn't to look at that larger policy implication of taking on the inlet or a portion thereof. This is really targeted to the asset that you lease from the federal government. So when we talked about expanding the water lot, it's the harbors, like the small craft harbors water lot only. So in order to facilitate this, you need, call it 20 meters added to your existing water lot. That's just to accommodate the floats. That isn't addressing your larger question of, do we want to have care and control of the inlet, right? So have it declassified as a federally regulated harbor. It's no longer a navigable channel. All those things that go along with it. That's a different question.
Okay.
Yeah.
So who would we go to for that information? Not you, somebody else.
I would recommend talking to some other agencies that have experienced it. So Victoria Harbour Authority, I think they're a port authority technically.
They are.
Under
That's the
Infrastructure
difference.
Canada. I know False Creek Harbour in Vancouver went through a similar issue where because it's a navigable channel, people are just living and mooring in the inlet there in False Creek. City of Vancouver may be able to comment on that. Those would probably be the two most challenged communities. Even the town of Ladysmith. Similar sized communities yourselves, and they had lots of vessels parked in the harbor. But similar circumstances, is that it's still under federal regulation. So that would be my advice. Talk to those three.
Okay.
A good start. They didn't expand their water lots in those cases, and I think maybe the councillor's question was, if there's a process for expanding in that red zone, is the permitting process, if we made that if we just made that larger and larger, it would be the same process? Or would we run into a different set of problems?
This is slightly different because this is a water lot lease from the province. What you're talking about is changing the jurisdiction from the federal government to a municipal government. That's a whole different kettle of fish.
Well,
Okay.
we're wondering if we
Yeah.
don't have to, actually, is the question is whether we
Yeah.
can
So
actually.
this is just simply giving you permission to moor some additional floats.
Yeah.
That's all that is.
Okay.
Okay.
Different scale, I suppose,
Yeah.
but people are asking us if
come
we
back.
can just change the lot, use the foreshore lot as a way to increase jurisdiction.
If you did it as if you did a provincial water lot lease for the inlet, that's different.
Okay, it would
that
change, the quality
yeah.
would change it to scale, the scale
Yeah,
would change it.
I think it's a different process from what I understand. If you did a water lot, that's a provincial application. Whereas what I understand the issue is you're actually wanting to have it declassified as a navigable channel. So changing the whole jurisdiction and the different authorities that the federal government has versus the province.
Councillor Seegers, Councillor Mueller, and then Councillor Wright.
Yeah, I just had a follow-up on that point. And I think what Councillor Seegers was getting at, or at least a distinction I'd like to make, is in that red area, if say you were to add 3, does that then become a significant engineering challenge at that point that precludes the cost of it?
So the water lot lease is there's different levels. You could do a map reserve, a section 12 map reserve, which is a notation of interest. That might be sufficient to allow you to do this. A water lot lease there's a fee associated to it, more than a map reserve. So that's something that when you get into it, you have to determine what is the best form of tenure that you're securing. And then when we do the engineering, is they'll then delineate what type of mooring system you're going to put in. That will then inform your application, because when you do apply to the province, they're going to want to say, why do you actually need this water lot? What I've done is pretty much a tabletop exercise saying, if you want to increase your moorage by 30% to accommodate your demand, here's a float arrangement that works. I assume that we're doing pilings, but you can do anchor chain systems as well. Your float plane operation would have an anchoring system with a mooring system, but then again, you have to do marine survey to see how long the chains have to be and all that type of thing. So that's why it's really critical. The next phase really would be to get some engineering work done to quantify exactly how big this area needs to be. I think this is probably pretty darn close. It might be modestly changed from that engineering report, and that would be kind of your next step to move that one forward. So that engineering will inform your water lot application.
Yeah, right. And the reason why I raise that is because, you know, I think that most of the councillors on this side understand that this is not going to be a money maker. Overall, we're going to spend more money than we get from it. And the addition of floats, how that impacts that. Like we're making serious judgments about staffing and these other types of things that just, I think most of us, I don't want to speak actually for anyone else, but that the costs have to be in control. And we'd like to know that with all the different options that you presented.
Yeah, and with that one too is, I think two probably core assumptions that you'd want to make is if you do partner with float plane operators, that you would probably want as part of that negotiation, have them provide additional funding for improvements to the main harbor. And it also is predicated on securing grant funding from the federal government, either through small craft harbors or through some of the other funding streams that are available. Right, but again, it's competing in terms of what are the key local priorities within that.
And I think Councillor Mueller was referencing operating as well as capital. I mean, there's ongoing financial obligations here. Councillor Wright?
Thank you, Your Worship. That was one of the things that I was going to ask you to speak about. Could you talk a little bit about the timeline? Because we would have to fit expenditures into a capital budget. And if I'm not mistaken, our Director of Finance is probably well into his budget, or at least started his budget process. And if we don't have a sense of that timeline, I think we might miss the 2019 budget entirely and then end up waiting another year for council to discuss it and plunk it into a budget. Could you talk a little bit about that timing and what's involved in that?
It's always the chicken and the egg thing. You need some pre-planning money out of your operating budget. So it wouldn't be a capital project initially because you don't even have it really scoped out yet. You don't know how to even quantify it really, right? So what you would probably want to have in your 2019 budget is some funding to do some planning work associated to whatever development opportunity you'd like to pursue, spend those resources, and then maybe target for this time next year to have that assessment done, have the costs associated to it quantified so that you can then budget it. The water lot application process will probably take better of a year, right? So we're talking a couple years out, best case scenario, before you actually start seeing some major improvements. If we're talking about this one project, like the finger float expansion, you could probably do much quicker than that.
This is really useful. I'm not sure what direction you need to move this from a draft to a final, but my gut level instinct is we need to actually deal with the float plane issue because of infrastructure issues and just the need for transportation. But the redesign of the land base and the pedestrian access and the people place is also really important. Just having people flow through and around that. And I wasn't thinking of events or anything, but I know when the boats that I get halibut come in, there's 300 people come down to get halibut that day. Yeah, maybe more than that over the course of 8 hours. So it wouldn't be hard to turn that into a festival.
Yeah,
just a couple of tents and some music, and the sales are already going on. But I think, and I'd have to hear from other committee members, but in terms of how you look at those three scenarios and different priorities you have there, but my gut instinct is we really have to address the float planes for future infrastructure and transportation. But we're turning that whole neighborhood could become one of the unique, connected to the marsh, easy access and around. Could be a really significant pedestrian place for Seychelles. And as you say, the one coast one to our left looks pretty good.
It does.
Get around it, you get to the other coast, and you don't know where to walk.
Yeah.
Or
And
park.
it's the calm, less windy side. Yeah.
And it's the site that you think would be easier to access. Councillor Shanks.
Yeah, we've all had our input on this, and I think I'm in agreement that to follow up on the finger floats initially would be a good idea. We have to weigh the cost of that, and definitely anchoring a float plane operation of some kind in there, because we already have one proposal that's been put forward, but it would have to go out to the general public, and that would start the ball rolling. But definitely something should be planned for this year in our budget process.
I think the question would be whether the draft report suggests phases or whether we leave that for the budgeting process. And I'm not really sure about the best way to, because obviously some things are easier to pick off and some, as you say, are going to take a year or more. So it might be useful if the draft actually, from what you've heard today, gave you a sense of which of your three scenarios. And you'll notice that we're balancing the two extremes. We're picking up your finance and your community one. We're not going to let you get away with doing that. We want both. But it would be useful for staff to help assist in that sense of, do we phase it? What would be the quick wins? And what would and we have to start looking at pricing. And I don't know if you could get that into the 2019 process or not. That would be a question for our finance staff. And Councillor Mueller, and then we'll move on to Scredo, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was a great report, and just speaking to what we think is important in there, I think the mayor's correct. The intermodal nature of what we have going on for transportation and sea shelf, the float planes matter. We know that they're used often by many types of people, and it's an important function. And even if it does require an investment to facilitate, it's something that we should probably consider. But in terms of on a site basis, the parking is at the very top. And were we to entertain a movement of the float plane, we're going to absolutely need parking right away or in advance of that, because we're in a situation where it's just getting worse, and I don't think we can do without it. So I think I just wanted to make that point.
And Councillor Seegers, please.
Thank you. Sorry, I have a frog in my throat right now. With regards to that parking across the street, we're looking at a curve and angle parking, people backing into a curve where they would potentially have blind, they couldn't see what they're doing.
Yep, coming down the hill, right?
Either that or the other way, depending on how they're parked. So, I mean, I like the idea of parking. I have concern about that spot for putting parking in. We'd really have to look at how we'd make that happen and make it safe. In your report, on page 12, 13, problem 13 basically, you make some statements around commercial fisheries declining, etc., and yet the graphs tend to show that it's increasing. So I don't know how I understand overall commercial fishing has gone down, but your graphs don't show that.
True.
Both of them are.
It's the aquaculture sector is really outpacing traditional commercial fisheries.
Right, but you still, if you look at 2014, 15, and 16 at the top of that page, you've got commercial is increasing, and yet in the paragraph before you say it's decreasing.
Yeah, so if you look at the number of fishers,
yes,
and the people employed is decreasing, even if you're seeing better returns.
Okay, so
right?
that you might want to reference that and make it a little
that.
clearer.
Yep, I'll do that.
So
That's a good point.
Right, the same with the employment. You're saying employment is going down, yet it's showing employment going up as well. So just a little more clarity around
what sectors have growth and what ones.
Yes,
yeah.
and
good point.
Clarity with those. Another thing you mentioned in here at some point is things like stand-up paddle boards, other facilities for the public to actually interact with the water. And then further on, you don't mention any more about that. So I don't know if that was something
that's in on the customer amenities piece, right? So that would be, let's say we wanted to add on to the existing harbor office. You could lease out a space for a kayak company or a paddleboard company. There is business adjacent to. That's where that piece can fit in. So then you can maybe put something out to the public saying, look, we've got some rental space available for a local business to partner with us to say, you can have this piece for whatever,
Okay.
to interact with the marine environment, yeah.
So maybe another mention of that when you talk about that, because you mention it in one place, but then it's not actually included in the customer amenities. You talk about things like washrooms and showers and
Yeah.
those kinds of things, but not necessarily those others. So I didn't know where you were actually putting it in the report.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Other than that, I like the report. It's good. Few grammatical errors that I think you'll correct as you go forward. And other than that, I'm okay with it.
Just to follow up on Councillor Seeger's notations of the different graphs and things, you might want to give us a reference for the population ones too. They were puzzling. Population numbers are not what we're used to seeing.
Okay.
So that you might have pulled provincial as opposed to federal or something. I don't know where you pulled it. But
I did try to reference those sources,
yeah,
but yeah, if you
I
have
was
better,
I was looking for footnote 3 because the numbers weren't what I expected to see.
and they could be a little bit old, because I was going off of maybe earlier census data. It's possible.
Okay. Thank you very much. I think people did appreciate the report, and it got us thinking. Might not have had quite as much attention to it as we would normally, because lots of us are really busy right now.
Okay.
You can tell that because all the voices are a little bit hoarse and
Yes.
quiet.
And you're a little preoccupied
We're
right now. I
talking too
understand that,
much.
yes.
So, but thank you very much for your report, and we'll move on to the next item.
Okay, thank you.
We look forward to the final draft, and that'll probably be addressed for the 2019 budget. Could I ask the Deputy Mayor to chair the 6.2 or get it started so I can take a quick break? And we'll get Scredo up here, but I'll come back while you're talking.
Do I have a motion to receive the report from Scredo? Seconded. And all in favor? Welcome. So if you'll push the mic, thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. Thanks for having us in here. I don't think I have too much in the way of introduction. We were invited in to answer your questions about the mid-year report that we submitted some time ago. So I'm ready for your questions.
Questions from councillors?
Thank you.
Councillor Seegers.
Thank you for the report. I just want to say that in going through it, I found it a little confusing given the years. So you're saying your year end is August 31st?
Correct.
But then when you're talking about 2018, 2017, I don't know which year you're talking about. Are you talking about the 2017 that ends in August? Or are you talking about the 2018 that actually starts September? Which is 2018 that you're referring to?
So if we refer to 2018, that would be starting in September of 2018. So
Okay.
2018-19.
Through the whole report?
Yeah, similar to a school year. I'm not sure. I'd have to go through to double check.
Yes, I found that there was
Okay.
some conflicting references, because I know some of the work you've been doing.
Right.
And I know that some of what you've referred to as happening in 2018 actually would have been in that
right.
2017, 18 period, whereas others of it, that was the 2018, 2019.
For
So-
sure. I understand that could be confusing.
Yes, so I would need the report cleaned up that way so that we can actually reference each year accurately.
Right. So rather than reporting the calendar year, report the planning year.
Not
that actually
necessarily,
took in,
just-
so that it was consistent, one way or the other, it could be
Yes,
consistent. Yeah.
yes, so there's not the overlap, because then I look at your budget and your program year, and then I can't determine okay, so what am I looking at that was covered off in this one year versus what's coming out of the other budget?
Understood.
Okay, so I'll let it go for that. I've got others, but we'll come back.
Thank you. Councillor Mueller.
Thanks. I guess before I get started, I just want to congratulate Scredo for bringing in the administration budget so low and transferring so much money into carry forwards and into actual programs. I think that was one of my main concerns when we started this project, and it's really great to see that that hasn't become an issue yet. But I have some questions around some of your programming, specifically about the business roundup. It's a $65,000 expense, and I'm just curious. I went looking for more information around that. I'm just curious how that expense is expensed.
Yeah, so the first year of that program primarily involves rolling out a software package to be used by us and all of our partners. So rather than Scredo provisioning software and hiring somebody to develop a database of all the businesses on the coast and their employment, whether employment's growing or shrinking and business is growing and shrinking, we're partnering with all the business associations on the coast. So that involves the 3 chambers of commerce, SDBA, the Roberts Creek Community Association's business committee. So rolling out the software and providing training to all those groups is proved a little bit more. It took more time than we thought, and so we have a consultant that's helping us do all that training. So there's a chunk spent on those partners for the work that they've contributed to the project, and then the first year implementation cost of the software is an expense. Those are the 2 biggest chunks, but I guess we could provide a breakdown.
Yeah, I was just curious.
I think it's
Seemed
more
like a
so
large
that,
number.
so we're just now at the point of full rollout to where we'll start having information to share from all of that data that's been collecting. We're just now at the point where this fall is the time we actually have some data to look at to start giving key performance indicators and to talk about, hey, this is what's happening. We're seeing this. We're just at that point.
The biggest partners are just importing their databases into the central database right now, like this month.
And then a follow-up, if I may. There's a number of items on the list that are basically Scredo, I don't want to say taking over, but getting very heavily involved in certain types of things that existed before, like the hub, and this is the coast. And so I'm just curious about the ongoing costs associated with that. So these, are these one-time, or what portion of these were one-time that will then become long-term?
Well, the trend for that is that, sometimes, we've probably all watched over the years, initiatives happen, projects launch, and then for one reason or another, they founder. Either the initial founding people have drifted away in a good ideas language because they didn't fill in volunteers or just fell off people's radars. So the reason that we adopt those orphan programs is to save the investment that was previously made in them. But then we redefined their goals and missions to match our strategic plan and the funding too. So we're not adopting any liabilities from any of those programs, if that's the nature of the question. And when we adopt them, we're taking over the branding and the mission and changing it to our own and refunding it differently.
Yeah, I think my question was more towards, so if it was $13,000 to take over the hub, how much is that a one-time cost, and how much of that is a long-time carryover?
Oh, Fuse Work Hub, right, yes.
Yeah,
That's right. Well, that cost was $9,000, I believe, for the assets, and then the expanded programming that we're doing there. So I'm sorry, what was the question again about that?
So then in a year by year, then given what you just said, 9,000, so there'd be basically about 5,000 carryover, or 4,000 in a given year, operating costs of the hub.
I'll refer to the treasurer.
So yeah, 9,000 was can you?
Yeah, sorry.
Closer. So 9,000 was, approximately 9,000 was the initial capital expenditure. What the goal for this coming year is not to just run the Fuse Hub the way it was run last year. There's an ongoing goal and a process going on that might lead to a, tripling effect of what's coming, depending on some grant applications, depending on where this goes. So we're not going to see exactly what happened last year happen this year.
Right.
And you're also not seeing very many revenues hitting yet in that first report that you took, because this report is as of June 30th, and we took it over June 1st, May-ish, yeah. So you haven't seen revenues coming in to offset some of those operational costs, which you would see coming in our end-of-year report.
Yeah.
And just before we leave that point, I went and I had a look at some of those websites and some of those, it's been a while since I've looked at them. And I just wanted to make sure that we acknowledge the commitment from Scredo to those organizations on the website, so that everywhere you go, you see that.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you for that. And Councillor Wright.
Oh, thank you, Your Worship. Under Project 1, which is your business roundup, it says the first bullet is gain insight into the coast businesses community, and the second bullet under that is understand perceived barriers. When I see something like that, I go, okay, so what are some of the perceived barriers that you believe are there, or what are you hearing because I know it's a data information collection. You must have some of, or do you not have those yet?
Oh, yeah, we do. We have some of that, absolutely. So,
Could you just give us a quick rundown on some of
absolutely.
those?
Well, the top of the list is the, when we ask businesses what their primary obstacle to growth is, and then we ask them what their secondary obstacle to growth is, and almost 40% of businesses say the primary obstacle to their growth is labor. It's not capital, it's not training, it's not markets, it's labor. And when asked what for the secondary one, something like 25% say that, you know. So it confirms what we anecdotally know. There is a labor shortage on the coast, and the labor shortage is due to the rental shortage. So those are top of our list. Yeah.
And I would say that the labor shortage related to the rental shortage, whenever there's a supply shortage, it's about income and revenue. You pay people enough, they'll come and live here. I don't want us to pay what they pay in northern Alberta 2 years ago, but if there's a shortage of labor, you have to pay people to come, then they'll have enough money to pay for the rents as well. So let's start looking at income.
Absolutely. When we were at the Economic Development Conference in Kelowna and talking to the people from the Okanagan Valley, their housekeeping staff make $25 an hour for doing rooms. It's because they can't get the staff. That's what they pay, and so we notice that here. Yeah.
Anything else on the report as we carry on? Thank you, Councillor Seegers.
Thank you. Page 3. I noticed you started out with 3 main categories of focus and objectives, and then as of 2018, you've actually split regional information into community and resources and infrastructure.
Yes. So the question is, why do we do that?
Yes.
It made a lot of sense to us to realign. So in the charter that we received from the 4 funders, it said one of the things they wanted us to do was regional information coordination. So we made a program area dedicated to that. But it became obvious very quickly to us that touches everything that we do. It's not a program area. It's everywhere that we run the programs. We should be collecting and centralizing that information. So it didn't need its own. And conversely, we didn't have a program area for infrastructure and resources, which are very key and important aspects of our economy.
Okay, on page 8, you talk about reported project KPIs. In the second bullet, you identified 15 interrelated challenges, and this goes back to the previous question. You indicated housing, childcare, lack of on-coast training, lack of skills for entry-level employees, cooperation, networks to grow pools of skilled workers. Where do you have that list of 15? I think that's important for our community to know what those are.
I would agree, and I would say also that's what I was saying a little bit more in that we're just at the point, right? This was written in June.
Right.
We're just at the point coming into fall where we've got some good survey data and are willing to draw some conclusions. Yeah. At the June point of writing, we just barely were getting survey data that's continued to increase, and so yes, coming.
Okay. Project 3, Sunshine Coast Tech Hub. Yes. So I don't see anything happening with regards to this. I wondered, when did you guys take this over?
So the Sunshine Coast Tech Hub is a non-incorporated club of geeks on the coast started by Richard Hoth, and it's mostly just a Slack channel. But they have events and get-togethers and meetups, and lots of people have been getting employment and making important contacts there. And Richard wanted to step down and wanted somebody else to be the lead cheerleader for the group, so we volunteered our staff to do that. And we haven't it kind of fits in with the Fuse Work Hub and the plans that we have there for making that a home for these types of groups. But we haven't done any activities with it yet.
Okay, and how does Innovation Island fit into that?
Well, like I said, we've had some meetups, but we haven't made a big push for it. Sorry, what was the question?
Okay, how does Innovation Island, see, meetups, it talks about one since 2018, but how does Innovation Island fit into this piece? Or does it?
Well, it only does in the sense that when we have those types of workshops, or when we support those workshops to run, we have a communications channel into that community to invite those entrepreneurs out to those events. So Innovation Island runs a series of workshops for business startups. So when we say, hey, you guys with startups, you want to learn how to take it to the next level, come join us. So it's about building a community and communication channel.
Okay. So final question.
Yeah.
Sounds like a game show. Final question. When you get some more of this information together, how will you be communicating back to us? Because one of the things I'm hearing in the community is nobody knows what you're doing.
Yeah. So we didn't want to build a bunch of expectations by announcing all the stuff that we're going to do. We really want to announce all the stuff that, hey, this is done, and take a look at it. So most of our projects, and especially our bigger ones, are on the verge of going public, we'll say. And at our last board meeting, we kicked off a project to build our Kpi Dashboard. So we'll have a web page with all of the stats that we, as we summon them, so that you can go see everything in one place. That's the intent.
But there was a conversation previously with the various governments around regular information put forward to the paper, et cetera, and I haven't seen any of that.
I'm not familiar.
It was going to be,
Well, so as projects have launched,
Yes.
there have been write-ups on those projects.
Okay.
Right? When we took over Fuse, there was a write-up.
yes, I saw that.
When we were working through really garnering people into the regional calendar, there was a write-up. So at appropriate points, there have been. This fall, there's another lineup of, so yeah, we have to have the press releases done for this, this, and this.
Okay.
The regional calendar is up and at 'em, but hasn't truly launched to the public yet. That's coming this fall. So there are elements of that, yes. What is hard and what we struggle with is turning this into super easy, general public is ready to read that, right? It's a broad spectrum, and how do you put that in one newspaper article? Because they don't all fit. They're all, they're...
It's just
So
like
that's
an
a
election
struggle.
campaign.
Yeah, well,
110 issues, and you got to get it down to 3 bullets.
Within our charter, we need to report to all of our funders at least
Yes.
twice a year to say, hey, stuff is actually happening. We're working on these things. We're looking for some input, but and so that's what this part of the process is. And this becomes a public document then because it's on everybody's meeting agendas.
What I'm hearing in the community is they need to know you're doing something. So it doesn't have to be pretty.
Yeah,
It
we
doesn't
got
have to
to.
be finished. They want to hear, we're working on a project, we're working on a calendar, right? We're looking to launch it in the third quarter, or whatever. And these are the kinds of things we're looking to incorporate into it so that the public knows that something's going on behind the scenes. Because the questions we get asked, what are you guys doing with the money we gave you?
Yeah.
And they don't see anything.
Well, I've got 2 comments I wouldn't mind making to that. I mean, one is, so you know what's intentional and what's accidental. Internally, we have an interest that the projects and the project branding gets attention.
Yes.
Scredo as a name in the public is not important internally to us. I can understand it, it's important that and it's important that the 300 leaders of all the different civil societies on the coast know what we're doing. But as far as the general public goes, it's only the projects that are important to brand.
I disagree.
Well, yeah.
Because it's through
Or co-branding.
the public that we can actually grant you the money.
Right.
If they don't think you're doing anything, then we can't give you the money, which means you can't do anything. So
enough.
they need to be on board.
Yeah, fair enough.
Okay.
And the other comment, there's 2 comments on that. The other comment was just that, when we were formed, I believe the intention from the funders was they didn't want to do this 1 year at a time, ad hoc, one-off, unstrategic economic development. They wanted strategic economic development takes more time to build the collaborations, to build the foundations of the projects that are ongoing. So I think that's part of what that is. But we're so darn close to being able to put out a nice sheet of, look at the 12 things that we've accomplished with 6 months of staff.
We'll come back to those general issues. Councillor Inkster, I thought, and then Councillor
Yeah, thank
Lutz.
you. Thanks. I always want to thank your people like you that come to our table because it's a number of you involved. It's a lot of work and it's sometimes thankless because you come to us and we ask a lot of questions about what have you done for us lately. So I always want to thank your group for doing that when you come in front of us. It'll be interesting to see how you communicate to the public what you're doing, why you're doing it, what it means and what it leads to. Because we know that the old style ED of smokestack chasing is not what we necessarily expect, especially in a community such as ours, but also where the world is going because of digitization, etc. So, you get asked the questions at our table, and I always ask them when we are responsible and accountable to the public for the money they spend. You come to us, we have to ask those questions. But it will be interesting how you communicate to the public about what you're doing and how you're doing it and what it will lead to and what will be the product and results. I'm always looking forward to that because I think when we do economic development discussions, and right now, as the mayor referred to, we're in the middle of something right now. Sometimes the public wants you to talk about, I always joke about the shibboleth of jobs. They always want you to talk about jobs. You know, how many jobs did you create when local government's role is not that? It's creating the atmosphere for jobs, the proper atmosphere. So I'm looking forward to how you communicate to the public on what you're doing and what it's supposed to create for our community.
Thank you. And Councillor Alice Lutz.
Thank you. I'd like to ask about the Workforce Development Alliance. Could you tell me a little bit more about that? I see the Open Door and Capilano University involved. Is that just specifically training?
No. So last year we brought together, was it 40 people in like 20 some odd organizations together just to go around the table so that each organization knew what everybody else was doing in that space. You know, we all think everybody knows everybody and what's going on, but it's amazing the number of new people in all those positions, and they don't know what's going on. So it proved valuable just from going around the room and having everybody take a little time to announce who they are and what they did and what challenges they were facing. And there was a number of takeaways that we have from that meeting, and we're having another one coming up in October, the annual one, where we're going to be coming back and presenting, okay, based on all the feedback we got from everybody, this is what we've been working on, and so it's a very valuable group. Did you have some?
Well, and also workforce development as a whole is a large program area where multiple things fit in, right? So there's the Workforce Development Alliance, which is one part of that. There's also, that's where we put Innovation Island, was classified under that. Training programs, service and leadership programs, those are all in that larger workforce development umbrella. How do we make sure that the people employed on the coast are doing the best they can do? Do they have the tools? Do they have the resources? Can businesses find enough staff? All of those things fit within that workforce development area.
And Councillor Lutz.
Just a follow-up. Was Scredo involved in the call for interested retired people to return to work?
Yes. So we put, we did a couple of, took a mission up to Whistler to check out the Whistler Experience program, their customer service program. We put took a lot of people with us from, they all paid their way, from Open Door Group and a couple of the chambers, a bunch of other organizations. And some of the best work that came out of that was on the carpool on the way up there, learning more about what everybody did, and learning from the Open Door Group that they were having 2 or 3 seniors a day come in looking for work. Just blew our minds, right? And most of them would beg off when they found out that the work, any earnings would come off their supplemental benefits and other stuff. So we helped them organize a session where they brought people in from the government to talk about the pension plans and the supplemental benefits and how work affects that and how they can structure things better. Yeah, absolutely. You can go back to work and you can rent out your basement suite and you'd be doing more for your community than you would know if you're a senior on the coast.
My concern there is the possibility of losing jobs for younger adults to seniors.
There's so many unfilled positions right now in so many businesses.
But then again, that's income. And in my mind, an employer can hire a retired person not having to pay benefits, not having to pay as high a wage. I think that it hinders the attempt to bring our wages up in the community.
Right.
Just my thoughts.
I understood, yeah.
And it's not just entry-level positions either, though. There's a spectrum of positions that are available. There are professional positions available.
Yeah.
That they're having trouble filling for whatever variety of reasons that is.
And it's complex. We won't get into labor economics, and there's a social reality. People want to be fulfilled and utilize and use their skills, and about a half a dozen people around this table that could have stopped 10 years ago.
Sadly, Canada Pensions wasn't as accommodating as they could be.
And Councillor Mueller, and then I'm going to try and wrap it up. We do actually have about 8 other things on the agenda.
Yeah, I just wanted to once again provide my thanks. I know that this has been a lot of work for the volunteers that are involved, and to me, I think you're doing a really good job at providing the resources to the programs, which is what we really wanted. You know, routinely up here we see organizations come through that have 2/3 of their budget for administration, for an office, a printer, and one staff member and a computer. And that's really not what I wanted to see. We have actually seen economic development organizations in this community focused on champagne and caviar. And that's not what I see you guys doing. You're doing a fantastic job. Thank you.
Okay, just to wrap it up, I would also thank you. But what you did hear from the council, I think, reflects what you're hearing in the community in many ways. And if you reflect on the politics of economic development organizations in the last, let's say, 10 years, so we can be broad in it, and we're right in the middle of another election, it is important that your profile and you be seen to be doing the work you're doing. So some of us, if not all of us, but I hope most of us, understand the slow and invisible work that's being done if you're actually going to do ground up community development, community economic development. And those of us who were supporting Scredo's approach were very aware that it wasn't the other kind of economic development that sometimes has a higher profile. But having said that, the community still wants to see some visible realities. They want to know that you're active there. And some of that is as simple as websites and press releases. We see some press releases. I go looking on the web for ECDEV in Sechelt and Sunshine Coast, and I don't get a very clear picture of anything going on whatsoever. So some of it is that kind of presence. Some of it is reporting in a more specific way than some of this is kind of high level reporting. And so people read it and say, well, what's going on? You heard several councillors say, well, what did that really mean? What did you do? So some of it's that kind of reporting. But we want to ensure that you are here for the long term. As you know, the Scredo, the regional approach started with a charter that was done in the middle of 2013, I think, 2014. And it took a couple of iterations. The consultant came through. In between, there was another economic development approach. Then the 2014 election, 2015, we finally got, that takes a long time. And we don't want to see that lost because there's no visible signs of this work. And I think that's what you're hearing from councillors more than anything is we appreciate that you're in fact highlighting programs and not running around the coast saying how great the executive is or the board. But there's been a lot of questions in the last 6 months. And it's about visibility and profile. And it's about visibility of the whole ECDEV thing. And part of it is because governments almost too willingly went arm's length and said, oh yeah, finally we got a solution, you can look after it. So we'll take some of the blame. We can pull back some of the profiling, but we didn't want to go too far. But I think we'll have to see some adjustments over the next 12 months. And you say some are coming, and there'll be adjustments up and down the coast after the October elections. So hopefully we'll see you here in 3 and 4 and 5 and 10 years. But right now there's a little bit of growing pains.
Yeah, well, it's a big takeaway, and I think, maybe we should be timing a press release version of our annual and midterm reports that go out at the same time. A twice a year roundup of everything we're doing might do the job. Yeah. Then I did recognize, I think some of you may have seen a YouTube ad for Victory Sweets, and I realized that there's no Scredo logo on that, and perhaps there should have been. That was us. Yeah, that was us.
Well, maybe not, though.
The other thing that is on our communications plan as well is the fact that we know that we will be reintroducing ourselves to this table, because this table probably won't look exactly like this table.
No.
Right? And so at least we know one person's not running of the group, right? So at least there'll be one new person.
And the other 2 tables will be entirely
others could be entirely new. And so
there's one on the SCRD and one at Gibson's.
Yeah.
Which is amazing.
And so just depending on total reintroduction of how that works.
Yes.
And what the goals were that we were laid out with, and what we heard the goals were, and also to also, like you've said, to give time, because you know how long it took the charter to get developed, and then it took a year to really select and go, and then it took another year to actually deliver any money.
Well, the service program and then the money.
So
many
Yeah.
steps.
No, quite aware, and I really do
We're
think
not
it
that
has to
far
be,
away from that.
has to be community. It has to come from there. You lay those foundations and
Yeah.
come slowly up. Okay, thank you very much for coming again and talking to us and letting us ask you critical questions. And we're actually happy with what you do, and it sounds like we're not.
We'll get it launched. Thank you.
Okay. 6.3, Seashelled Arts Festival update, and we're getting real close to the 11th annual Seashelled Arts Festival.
Okay,
Thank you, Diana
I'm up
and
now.
Ross.
I'm going to keep it short.
Okay, and we won't ask any questions. So.
It's okay, you can ask me some questions. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Thank you for having us. I have a short report that's been submitted because we'll have a very thorough report in November, either November or December, but we usually get started on that shortly after the festival ends in October. So as you might expect, we have been very busy trying to get everything ready for the start of the festival, October the 5th. So I just wanted to, I'm actually not going to go through this because this really just talks about a lot of the programming, and this was done about 2 weeks ago. Since then, our program guides have hit the streets, and there are quite a few outside of the door, so you can see, you know, all of the exciting bits and pieces about all the programming in the guide. We will be advising your coordinators shortly, probably this week, about who might be available to speak at some of those events, or at least to introduce them. I know Mayor Milne has agreed to introduce the festival on October the 11th, which is our art and heritage opening, per se. I just want to update one thing regarding our budget. We have updated the budget since the last time that we reported. Our original budget estimate was that we were going to be bringing in the festival for around $107,000. We've actually exceeded our fundraising goals, and we just received acknowledgement yesterday from TELUS for an additional $5,000 grant. So our full-on budget has now become $143,000 approximately. And that additional funding from TELUS is specifically for the Satio production that will take place in the Longhouse on October 5th and 7th. TELUS basically funds on the basis of youth and innovation, technical innovation. So we'll be having quite a bit of that in that particular production. So we're very fortunate. So a lot of the additional revenue, cash revenue, of course, will be going into production and performance fees this year. Also rental equipment, technical resources that are required to really mount our performance events. As well as that, just because we've finished all our programming and we've actually solidified most of our contracts, just as a straight summary, as we had projected, we will be engaging at least 85 performance musician or visual artists this year. We only have 8 people that would be coming from off coast for a couple of our performance events, and the rest are local and homegrown completely. Out of that group, approximately 10 to 12 of our artists will be heritage performers. We'll have several Japanese performers this year, so we want to continue to promote that idea of diversity. But all of those performers that are in that list, they're all getting direct benefit. I mean, that's been our mandate since day one, as well as providing educational and entertainment value and engagement in the community, is to make sure that we can provide an honorarium or a negotiated contract for all of our performers and our other contracted suppliers for the festival. So as well as that, we're going to be using 8 different venues this year, some of which are obviously paid venues, 3 for rehearsals. We have the Seashelled Indian Band Hall and also the Seashelled Longhouse being given, really rented to us in kind, which is wonderful. And, we're going to be providing revenue to Davis Bay Hall, Coast Academy of Dance for rehearsals, and 1 or 2 other rental venues. So aside from the typical venues, we're also using the Botanical Garden venue this year, as well as the Seaside Center and the Sunshine Coast Arts Center, as we normally do. Again, we have negotiated through our school outreach coordinator and also for our school show that approximately 400 to 500 students will be attending this year, definitely. We have a very rich program for our heritage program this year, and we've actually engaged Pender Harbor Living History Society, the Seashell Archives, the Seashell Legion, the Gibson's Legion, the Sunshine Coast Museum and Archives, and the Thames Swea Museum, as well as other historical consultants for our heritage exhibit, which we're sure will be very interesting for a lot of the school classes that go through. So all in all, when I round up those areas, those are all either direct or indirect benefits to the community as far as engagement and community synergy is concerned. The other thing too that people often overlook are the number of people that we actually engage that do receive direct economic benefit from the festival. And that's probably another 30 or 40 people that are either contracted as coordinators or painters or set decorators, caterers, signage companies, printing companies, sound and lighting technicians that we have to hire, professional riggers, freelance graphic artists, etc. So we do have quite a few other people, probably about 200 people or more that are engaged in the operations for the festival every year. So I just wanted to say that we will be obviously outlining that in more detail when we do our summary. We've also obviously, because of the great response from our funders this year, and we always want to thank all of our in-kind sponsors, including the District of Sechelt that help us with our accounting administration every year, as well as Parks and Rec who help us with our installations. But this year we were successful in receiving Canada Heritage Grant, a BC Arts Council grant, our TELUS grant, a Sechelt Indian Band grant and aid, our RBC Emerging Artists Foundation grant, as well as an indirect amount that will be coming through an artist that applied for a Canada Council grant that will pay for some of the production costs for the show that we're presenting on his behalf. And we also, this year, received donations from the Sunshine Coast Dance Society. So all of those wonderful people will have to be responded to in a final report, as well as the District of Sechelt come in November. But it's really great to see that kind of wonderful engagement in the festival. And we hope to be able to do this again next year. Questions?
Thank you very much. I think, and I'll open it up to the committee, but just before that, I really think this budget and this program, as it's coming forward, really shows the growth in what I'll call the post-Nancy production.
True.
There was a transition period, and we were sort of wondering how it was going to be, and it's we got two now, and it's doubled. I mean, this is a really strong budget and a really strong program. So thank you for that, and apologize if some of us were watching more carefully last year when the transition was going on and stuff. But this really shows that the two of you have come together on this really well. So.
Thank you.
And Councillor Seekers, please.
Thank you. Just a note for you. You've got Thursday, October 11th is the opening reception. Just to let you know that there is a Sechelt Chamber election forum that night, so you just might want to be careful about your timing, because if Mayor Milne is going to be opening it, he's also probably want to be at that election forum.
I'll send the deputy mayor. I don't know which one, though.
This is definitely more fun.
Then I wanted to talk about your budget a little bit.
Yes.
I noticed that you've got festival ticket sales at estimated at $16,500. Last year they were at $78,665. So that's a big chunk of that budget. How would you manage the festival if the ticket revenues are actually lower than budget?
Well, let's hope that doesn't happen. But actually, personally, we've estimated more. That's a very conservative amount because we have eight shows that will be ticketed this year. for twice as many as last year, actually. Now, if we didn't get that amount, I think what we'll probably do is put some of the income right now that's just been received or been promised in the last few weeks, sort of in reserve until everything, all the dust settles. There you go, dust settles. That's right. Just as a precaution, because ticket sales are the anomaly that you're just not too sure about. Now, we already have started our online ticket sales, and they're starting to move quite nicely. We really do feel very positive that our headliner shows at the Raven's Cry and at the Longhouse will sell out. A little bit more nervous about the one at the Botanical Garden, just because it's on Art Crawl weekend, and people will be very busy going to Art Crawl and whatever. But we've been very conservative about that estimate, which is in here as well.
And other committee members? I noticed your budget, $99,000 is coming from federal governments, and the donations and corporate things has dropped. I think in one sense that's good for stability, and it shows a different, funding is funding, and different skills bring different kinds of money into the table, but it's something that we would want to watch, and there might be a way of bringing the donors and foundations back up. I was pleased that the District of Sechelt, even though we've increased it to the 45,000, is still basically a third of your budget. So you've done really well in that, and I think that has to be noted and commended. That so if we gave you 50, you could, so you're leveraging really well.
We are trying to do that. We're trying to maintain that percentage.
Really good. The question about the tickets has been asked. It sounds like it's going to be really good. We'll just have to make sure opening night goes as it should.
I certainly hope so. It's going to be great. And I'll just check with your assistant regarding that timing. Yeah. Okay, terrific. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, and we all look forward to that 10 days, 2 weeks in October. Item 6.4, Festival and Event Strategy. And we have a report from the Arts, Culture and Communications Coordinator. And could I have a motion to receive the report? Thank you, Councillor Wright, Councillor Mueller. All those in favor? That's carried. And we return to Ms. Smith to give us her report.
Okay, thank you. So I thought instead of just reading from my report, I would actually give you a bit of a presentation today, because festivals and events are exciting things to look at and attend. They're not just words on paper. So festival and event strategy. The reason we're doing this is because festivals and events are really important to our community. And we're fortunate enough to have a number of long-standing, very successful events. Sechelt Arts Festival obviously being one of them, and also some new events that are doing quite well. The development of this strategy for the district is an important step in recognizing the significance of festivals and events to our residents and to visitors. And it's also recognition of the need to establish our priorities and to ensure that our policies and procedures are able to successfully manage our contribution to festivals and events.
Before you change the slide, can I ask who the 10-piece band in the left-hand corner is?
So at the Rogue Festival, I believe this was actually a collaborative effort of a number of bands that
helps.
Yeah. The strategy was developed in order to support the sustainability of our local events and to ensure that our approach to providing support for them can evolve to meet the needs of the community. So while the District of Sechelt supports a number of events and festivals, not all of them are going to be addressed in this strategy. So this strategy is meant to focus on community events and festivals that are generally of a benefit to the entire community and general public. So this giant list is a sample of some of the annual festivals and events that we support either directly or in kind that take place here in Sechelt. These are the types of events that we would like the strategy to address. Our role in local festivals and events has grown, and we're supporting on average 20 to 30 events each year, and that doesn't even include private bookings, weddings, field use by sports groups, sporting tournaments, Any events that are actually booked in venues, for instance, events that take place in Seaside Centre currently do not need a special event permit. So I'm not even counting those when I'm saying 20 to 30 events a year. And as you can see in the report, as indicated by the Hill Strategies report that we did last year, staff are providing significant in-kind support to festivals and events. In 2016, it was approximately 899 employee hours. In 2017, we've estimated it to be about 1,023. I'm willing to bet that by the end of this year, it will be similar, if not higher. And that stat is only tracking the outside workers, parks and public works staff. This does not include all of the in-kind support received from Financial Services Department, Communications, Arts and Culture. So why is it that we're providing support to our festivals and events? Well, it's for the social return on investment. It's for the benefits that they're bringing to our community. The social benefits include opportunities for our residents to actively participate in the community, the potential to build skills through volunteering, opportunities to contribute to the health and well-being of seashells, and the potential to build the community profile to let people know that we are an active and cultural community. It's for the cultural benefits, the opportunity to enhance local pride and cultural identity, to create a sense of cohesiveness, cultural enrichment, improving the understanding, creating a broader outlook, celebrating cultural heritage, and helping to understand and appreciate where it is that we live. There's also economic benefits. Our local businesses are the ones providing services and supplies to these festivals and events. We have an opportunity for our local artisans to showcase their wares. We have fundraising opportunities for community groups and charities. There's growth in tourism and overnight stays from our festivals and events. They encourage improved infrastructure for the community. And when visitors have positive experiences at our festivals and events, they're more likely to return and visit again in the off-season. There's also environmental benefits. There's lots of opportunities through festivals and events to have nature-based experiences, to improve the conservation of the natural environment, and to develop and maintain trail systems, and an opportunity to educate the residents and tourists alike about our local ecosystems. So this draft strategy that you have before you was created in alignment with a number of other local and regional plans and strategies, including our OCP, which encourages and supports festivals and special events as a way of celebrating community, and even includes increasing the number of community arts and cultural events per year as one of the targets and indicators of success. Our council policy on the importance of arts and culture, which not only supports festivals and events, but also encourages the improved use of our facilities so that artists and arts organizations can make the best use of our public facilities. The brand new Parks and Open Spaces Plan, which identifies community events as one of the primary leisure activities taking place in our public parks, and identifies a community gathering place as one of the primary uses for Hackett Park in particular. Destination BC's Sunshine Coast Destination Development Strategy. So you heard Paul speaking to this earlier. This identifies festivals and events as an important part of the local tourism industry. And a number of the goals in that plan are in direct alignment with goals in our own festival and event strategy. As CRDs, we envision a region-wide sustainability plan, which includes cultural vitality as one of the values of a sustainable community, and identifies some ways in which we can invest in festivals and events in order to improve the sustainability of our community. And the SCRD also published a zero waste guide for event planners, and that's something that we would like to encourage our event planners to make use of. So we've done face-to-face consultation with the event community over the last couple of years. We've had meetings. In particular, it was focused on updating a cultural plan, but a lot of the feedback we're getting is specifically festivals and events. And when we hear from them about strengths and weaknesses, some of the things that we're hearing in particular are the need for increased and or stable funding, access to in-kind municipal services and support, improved marketing to off-coast audiences, a purpose-built indoor venue to help grow events in the shoulder season. So you heard Diana speak to the vast array of venues that she's using to put on the Seashelt Arts Festival, which is fabulous. That's something very unique to Seashelt, but it's also an incredible challenge. What she might not have conveyed to you is just how much work it is to actually arrange for all of those venues. Not only the cost involved, but to be able to coordinate, to book all those venues for a big chunk of time is very challenging when none of those venues are purpose-built to be used for events in that way. And also recruiting and retaining volunteers. When we've done surveys on feedback from our residents for cultural services in Seashelt, what we hear most about are our festivals and events. They're considered our most important cultural asset. And the majority of people responding to our surveys will report that our festivals and events here are excellent or good. When asked which festivals and events our residents typically attend, the top 3 are the Farmers Market, the Art Crawl, and the annual craft fairs. Most residents are saying that the festivals provide an opportunity for them to connect with the community, and that this should be an area of focus for the next 5 to 10 years. We've had many internal meetings with staff across all departments. Festivals and events touch all departments at the District of Seashelt, and you'll see they touch a lot of areas in our community. In every presentation today, including the one on a harbor plan, included mention of festivals and events in some way. So it's no surprise that each department for our municipality deals with festivals and events in some way, and there's a real need to better manage things like the in-kind requests we get for support, inconsistencies in fees for the rental of our venues and equipment, increasing staffing needs for major events such as Canada Day, just a basic lack of clarity on who does what for festivals and events. There's no one department that manages festivals and events, and we need to make sure we're taking an integrated approach. Challenges staff are facing with last-minute requests and changes being made by event organizers, a lack of streamlined event information for use both by staff and the public, and a lack of alignment between our various bylaws, policies, and procedures related to festivals and events. So not all of our event organizers will see this because staff are very committed to providing excellent service, and we do our best to support festivals and events. But behind the scenes, there's often a lot of frustration and sometimes confusion and challenges faced by staff in order to actually provide those services to our community. So in developing this strategy, it was important to find direction and focus for our investment in festivals and events. And so a vision that's been proposed is that festivals and events in Seashelt are a means to improve livability, create social cohesion, and share with others both the natural and cultural attributes of our community. That festivals and events in Seashelt are recognized for their contribution to the local economy and community well-being, and that festivals and events in Seashelt are supported in a sustainable way. So to facilitate the success of our strategy, there's 3 goals that have been developed around which we've built an action plan. And it's important to note that the responsibility of addressing all of the concerns that we have in supporting festivals and events does not fall solely to the District of Seashelt. Many of the actions will require active participation from our local event organizers and also other community stakeholders. So our goal number 1 is to build community capacity and sustainability. We want our local event organizers to be able to sustain successful events. We would like to have an open and inclusive festival and events roundtable that would be established in order to provide organizers a means for regular input and opportunity for sharing, to better facilitate communications with staff, opportunities for training seminars, and opportunities for event organizers to collaborate with one another. We want to support events that enhance our community. Events have the ability to contribute to our goals and objectives as a community, and by supporting them, we can improve the livability of Seashelt, helping to create a sense of place. We can bring people together and enhance the well-being of individuals. And there's an opportunity for developing partnerships with folks like Sunshine Coast Tourism to address the marketing needs of our local events. And there's also opportunity for us to look into improvements to infrastructure and other ways in which we can support events. And we want to organize our municipal resources and procedures. We want working with District of Sechelt to be a seamless process. We want online resources that are easy to use. We want application forms that are easy to use. We want things to make sense both to staff and to festival and event organizers. We need to make some policy and procedural changes. And we hope that by doing this, we'll be providing efficient and user-friendly processes that are consistent to minimize frustrations for everyone involved. So at this time, staff are seeking council endorsement of the plan in principle, recognizing that this is a living document that will need to be reviewed by the public and by staff and by council to ensure that it continues to meet the needs of our community. We want to continue with community engagement, in particular with the festival and event organizers. We want to refine the application process and forms, establish service levels and resources, improve data collection and monitoring, and continue to test and deliver these improvements over the course of 2019. I thought I'd just leave you with a quote that I like here, the words of Glenn Murray, and he was an urban strategist and former mayor of Winnipeg, retired politician, I guess you would call him, who said, "Great cities do more than fix their pipes, pavement, and police service. They tap their unique cultural assets to generate wealth and create a place where people aspire to work and live."
Nice ending. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm sure committee members will have comments. It's a good report, and I'll leave it at that for now. Councillor Inkster, then look.
Yeah, I'd have to look at the report more closely and ask you more questions maybe going forward about this. Sometimes I hear that our procedures for renting our buildings and some of the access people have is not as seamless and easy. And I'm wondering if what you're proposing within that policy will make that easier, who to contact, who to talk about for renting buildings, what the fees are for different organizations, some of the things that I think you've probably heard directed your way and or complaints in reference to some of those questions. So hopefully this helps with that.
Yes, definitely. Although we do anticipate that there will still be a number of staff behind the scenes who work in festivals and events, I would like that the public's perception of it is that it's seamless, that it's not confusing for them. It's easy to understand, there's clear information, and it's consistent so that they do understand the processes and everything is working smoothly. Yeah.
Councillor Mueller and then Councillor Seegers.
Yeah, thanks. I tend to agree with the sentiment in your report, which is that festivals are one of the most important activities in our civic culture. One thing that I really, in this vein is we got to get to the point of the lowest minimum threshold of support from the district to a particular event, because we have certain events that take up a large part of our budget and resources with regards to this, and others that basically get no money or no support. And it's hard for us to judge which ones are valuable, but within a spectrum of taste, we should be able to support almost everyone in some way. And it's tough because we're getting to be a municipality of a certain size. So these events require obviously a big volunteer component. But once you get to a certain size, you need a paid coordinator. And that's where I think a lot of our events are starting to run up against the wall. It's tough, the volunteer culture, in a sense, we almost need to invest some money to really get that rolling again, because the volunteer gradually is dropping off year by year. And that's real critical to this. But I think if we have that kind of base threshold of support, we'll be able to deal with these in an egalitarian way.
It's a good policy objective. And Councillor Seegers?
Thank you. Great work. I do note, as you mentioned in there and in the report, that there are certain events that are not covered in this. And that's fine. I understand where you've gone with that. What I would like to see, though, is that as much attention is given to outlining for those events on the website as well, where they go for information and support. Because as you indicated, really now it's all mixed up and people are confused. They don't know where to go, and we don't have good guidelines for staff or for the public. It causes more work for everybody all around. So even if they're not included in this policy, I think you recognize too that we still need to have some clear guidelines for them and clear forms, et cetera. So I don't know how you'd fit that in this, but I'd like to see that addressed as well.
Yes, and I totally agree. That is how we're moving. As we've been meeting internally with staff, we've been trying to determine the best ways to sort of divide up some of this work. And we've also been looking at best practices from other communities that have also gone through this process and have recognized the need to streamline their services in festivals and events. There's some great examples out there of communities that have developed really simple, straightforward websites and special event guides to go with them that outline everything you need to know. And sometimes it's literally just a matter of reorganizing the information on the website so it's as clear as, are you booking a wedding? Are you planning a special event? And there's already some resources we're starting to put in place fairly soon. We should have an online portal to MIABC so that festival and event organizers needing to get the insurance that's required of them can do so through our own insurer, through MIABC. And through a really simple online system that's literally just a few clicks and they're done. So there's already some things that we're putting in place that before the end of the year, hopefully we'll have some impact on. I know we don't have as many festivals and events at this time of year, but hopefully for all of our events happening next year. So.
Great. Councillor Shanks.
Yeah, I can't agree with you more in terms of streamlining process. Being involved with the car show for many years sort of thing. The number of permits and copies of insurance and everything else we have to comply with is just horrendous. I can appreciate that it has to be done, but there's probably 8 or 10 different agencies. The more food vendors we get in there, even doing our corn roast, right? We get a permit for a health permit or a food permit for that. But no, I appreciate the report. Thanks very much.
Before I look for a motion to support recommendations 2 and 3, could you remind me of how the 2016 survey, the survey respondents were gathered? You had 100 survey respondents. Was it just, was it randomly in the library or walking around? Or?
There was a combination. So we had an online survey, and we also had a paper survey, and the paper survey was given out. I spent a couple days in the mall. I also spent a couple days at the Arts Center, and we also encouraged all festival and event organizers to. We had sort of roundtable groups. So there was a few. I also spent a couple days here. We just literally opened up this room and anyone who walked by. So there were a few opportunities out in the public to do it that way. And then also it was primarily online because no one likes having to spend that much time filling out a paper survey.
It'd be useful if we could afford. I was really interested in the attendance ones, and I think it's probably accurate. Canada Day and then Coast Car Club. But it'd be very interesting to know if we could throw a couple of questions into our citizen satisfaction one that gave us a sense of what the general population actually attended on these. I just probably take 2 questions.
Yeah, and that's something that we've noticed.
These are all self-selected. These are people
of course,
in some way want to contribute.
One thing that we did notice in doing this work is that there's a real shortage of data out there. Yeah. It's something that I know Sunshine Coast Tourism is also working on improving ways of collecting data about tourism. And I have asked them about whether or not there's ways that we can partner to provide resources to our local festival and event organizers to actually start collecting data and better understand our festivals and events.
Will it be necessary to reach Councillor Mueller's interest in an equitable approach to the multiple ones that we have, if we actually know what people are attending? So, Councillor Seegers?
Yeah, a couple more points. I notice on your strategic goals and actions, you're talking about training, volunteer recruitment, training, sharing, recognition, marketing strategies, workshops, those kinds of things. I'm wondering if, in light of what Scredo is doing, you could reach out to them and see if, there is a market for this on the coast, and perhaps in light of what they're doing with some of their other training opportunities, some of this could be fed in there as well.
Yeah.
That would assist. And then one other thing I noticed is all of your goals and actions have a stakeholder as Festival and Events Roundtable. So speak a little bit more about that.
So the idea there is that instead of having a formal council-appointed committee, in the past, we have had that in Arts and Culture Advisory Committee. This is an opportunity that's completely open and inclusive. Anyone who wants to come to these, anyone who sees themselves as a stakeholder or has an interest in festivals and events, any of the organizers can come. I've held a couple of these before, specifically targeting festival and event organizers. And they've been great opportunities for people to get to know each other better, understand what's going on with festivals and events. They tend to get so heavily involved in their own festival and event. Sometimes they don't have the opportunity to see what else is going on. So the idea was to actually, for us to host these on, maybe it's once every few months or once every couple months, we'd find something that worked for the group. And that occasionally they would be professional development opportunities. There might be a guest speaker or some type of a workshop element. Some of them would just be opportunities to sort of event plan a year at a glance, so get a sense of what's happening that year, if there's anything new or any changes in the calendar, and just generally opportunities for networking, resource sharing, and making sure that the event community themselves are finding ways to work together and problem solve. And so that's the idea, is that would be one of the core things in order to implement a lot of these, would be to make the most of our community event organizers, who really are our key stakeholder here with us, making this happen and making sure that there is no expectation that the government will simply solve every problem, because we can't. Nor can the event organizers themselves, a lot of them volunteers or very part-time employees, that we need to work together and find ways to achieve these goals.
Thank you. Knowing the limitations of government is a key factor. So could I have somebody move the recommendations? I think we can do 2 and 3 together. One, that we endorse the draft in principle, and secondly, that direct staff to continue getting feedback on it. Councillor Wright, Councillor Mueller. Any discussion on that? All those in favor? Thank you very much. That's carried. And the key on this is finding a way to support and sustain cultural and creative activities without having it too bureaucratic and government and barriers. So you're melding two parts of the world that don't always mix. Good work. Yeah. 6.5, Seashell Arts Festival, report from the Arts, Culture and Communications Coordinator. Move receipt. Thank you, Councillor Seegers, Councillor Mueller, all those in favor. And we'll turn back to you to take us through this one.
So before you is a report regarding the Seashell Arts Festival for 2019. In the past couple of years, we have renewed our contract with Arcadian Productions for producing the Seashell Arts Festival. And as you will see in the report, Arcadian Productions has been our primary producer of the festival. They were the first producer of the festival. There was a period of about 5 years where other people produced the festival. And then since 2011, they have continued to produce it. However, in keeping with our procurement procedures, it does feel like it's time to actually put this out to tender, and just in order to see whether or not there are any other groups that might wish to take this on, and just an opportunity to sort of renegotiate that contract. The one thing we are uncertain of, though, is that if for some reason the 2019 festival or any future Seashell Arts Festival would not be produced by Arcadian Productions, what the future of the Seashell Arts Festival Committee would be. So when we had a council-appointed Arts, Culture and Heritage Committee, that committee worked with the festival producer to apply for grants. When that committee was eliminated, the Seashell Arts Festival had to set up their own committee to continue applying for the federal grants. So of course, because the Seashell Arts Festival is a municipal festival, we can apply for any grants that municipalities are eligible for. And there are other grants that they need to partner with organizations on in order to be eligible for instance, the BC Arts Council grant. So that's one unknown, is whether or not that committee would potentially continue. But the committee does not have a direct tie to the District of Sechelt, except that I happen to sit on the committee.
Yeah. So there's two questions on that. One of them is it appears from the report that prior to 2013, it was actually a District of Sechelt mandated Arts, Culture, and Heritage Committee. Is that true?
Yes.
Okay. And that was at arm's length enough that they could still apply for grants that were outside of the municipal realm. And then since then, there's been an entirely community-based committee that's sort of brought together by the producers, more or less, and they're at arm's length enough to apply for the same kind of grants. So there's no technical reason why an arm's length committee couldn't exist and continue to exist just as attached to the festival.
They could. What I am saying though is that if for some reason Arcadian Productions was not the producer, because Arcadian Productions is who set up that committee. So whether or not those people currently on the committee would wish to continue with something is unknown. It's our current producers who hold that committee together.
Socially, but not legally or...
No, because it's not incorporated
That's
in
right.
any way. It's
Yeah,
not an official society or incorporation of any
I
sort.
think that's a really a minor issue, that if the festival needed a committee, we could either go back to the Arts, Culture, and Heritage Committee that was from the District of Sechelt, or we could simply make a call to those who are interested in the festival and in culture and in the community in general.
Yes,
I don't see it being, I can understand that there's a bit of a difference, but they should be at arm's length, even if it's the social function of the current ones to sort of hold it together.
The current committee also maintains a separate bank account so that they can actually manage the funds that are received from the federal government.
Bank accounts come and go. I'm just curious why it's seen to be an obstacle or a barrier.
It's not necessarily. It's that we don't know who will be the festival producer next year.
Yes.
And if it was an organization that had their own board of directors and did not wish to have an outside committee to work with, that might prove challenging in terms of applying for certain funding.
Or it might prove easier.
Or if they're a registered charity.
Exactly.
So it could.
So we don't know.
It's just an unknown.
Okay. So there's some unknowns. Anything, I agree with the notion that periodically our procurement should go through an equitable process where we sort of know that it's transparent. It's a key part. Councillor Seegers?
Thank you. I don't have page numbers on here, so I'm going to have to just refer to this on financial implications. So it indicates in here in the first sentence that the contract could remain at the current level of funding, 21.6 for production, the fee for a contract based on 830 hours at a $26 per hour rate. But if I go actually into the contract that's attached, it talks about 14,560, which is 560 hours at a $26 per hour rate.
Yeah, the reason being is that typically their contract would be for 12 months, and this year their contract was for a shorter period because we knew that we would likely take this to tender for 2019. So we had their contract end December 31st.
Okay.
Typically it would have gone until April of the next year.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
Anything else on this? Somebody to move the second recommendation that the committee recommend to council direct staff to issue an RFP for the role of producer of the 2019 Sechelt Arts Festival. Councillor Seegers, Councillor Inkster, any discussion? All those in favor? That's carried. And good luck to all the applicants. But it is important in terms of openness and transparency that we show that government work is being done. And our next item, 6.6, review of 2018 events, reports from the Arts, Culture, and Communications Coordinator has been busy. Not just
You'll see me again tonight.
Not just in the last month, but on occasion. Motion to receive the report.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you. That's carried. Go ahead, please.
I did just want to say that if I didn't realize until it was too late that for some reason the budget for Canada Day didn't appear correctly in, or at least in my copy. Can you actually see the budget for Canada Day at the very end of this report? It's not cut off, like mine is completely cut off. Oh, okay, it is there correctly, okay. Well, that's, because I actually added it as another slide to the end of that presentation I just gave just in case. So this is essentially a report to give you a bit of an overview on some of the direct delivered events that we did this year. Obviously, we won't receive a report from Sechelt Arts Festival until after it's complete. And we will be receiving a report from the Summer Music Series relatively soon. But we at least have some information from our Canada Day event and Oceans Day event. Because of some of the challenges we faced this year with coordinating the Hackett Park portion of Canada Day events, staff is recommending that for 2019, we actually combine the role of the Summer Music Series producer with the role of the festival, family events coordinator. This is primarily to deal with insurance. It was actually became so challenging for our family events coordinator to obtain insurance in order to host the event that she had to be hired on by the Downtown Business Association and be covered under their insurance in order to make this work for us this year. So we did definitely need that role. This was from the feedback we received from the community and the event organizers, probably one of the most successful Canada Day events we've ever done. And it was one of the first times where we truly partnered with the Downtown Business Association to really make the event happen. And we thought it was incredibly successful, but we really do need that coordinator for next year. And unless we're going to, double or triple the budget, I think that the best way to make this happen is to actually combine it with the Summer Music Series producer, and that whoever is doing that as a whole, it's a bigger contract. It makes more sense for them to actually have the insurance already in place and to be, investing in as being a festival producer. Another recommendation here is in regards to Oceans Day. So we've had 2 successful years for Oceans Day, and it's really clear that we have some strong community partners there who are really keen on continuing this event. But the amount of staff support required is only increasing, and I do think it's time now to turn it back to the community and let the community know that the District of Sechelt is interested in supporting such an event, but that we would like to see it supported in this similar way that we support other community events. So if there is a need for cash contribution, that the event organizers are applying for a grant. If there's a need for in-kind support, that they are coming to us in advance and requesting that. So instead of it being a direct delivered event, it would be turned back to the community to host. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have about it otherwise.
Councillor Inkster's had his hand up first. I didn't get the report printed in my agenda, so
Yeah.
I looked at it online, but I don't have it in front of me now.
Yeah, I don't have it in the sheets here either. So I'll just ask a question and hope that it wasn't in there somewhere, and I should have known. The dropping or the moving of Oceans Day event to the community, is that to happen immediately? Is that what you're recommending?
I would recommend that a decision be made at this time, whether we are to continue funding it and supporting it status quo, or whether it will be changed. One of the recommendations from everyone involved in it was that we need to get organizing events like that much farther in advance.
Yeah.
So it would be helpful for everyone involved to have a decision made at this time, so that if it is either way, we know how to proceed for 2019.
Yeah, okay. So my only concern is if we drop it to cold turkey, if that's a decision, and move it just with no movement towards working with the community, it may go quickly. So that's my concern.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like the community has indicated that they're ready to take it, or they know that they have to take it up, or has there been any discussions with any of the people who are sort of involved in that?
It's clear that they will still need both financial and in-kind support from the district.
But are they willing to initiate the festival and say, yes, we want to do it?
If the particular group that we've worked with is not, I feel fairly confident that it has been established enough that someone will.
Okay.
But I do feel, though, staff do need some council direction on what we're doing with this next year, because it was a little bit of a last-minute scramble this year to
Yeah,
figure.
we don't want that to happen.
Yeah.
We understand that. But usually, if you're expecting somebody else to show more initiative, we'd have to know that they're aware of that.
Yes, of course. And any decision that you make would be communicated directly with the Conservation Association so that they understand what the idea is
or
for
the community at large. If
yes,
somebody doesn't
yeah.
pick it up, the district isn't going to pick it up.
Is this a multi-step process then, where we're going with this in terms of communicating with the community, attempting to determine interest or potential support, and then it will include the Conservation Association, then a report comes back to council to move in that direction? Or is it going in another way where we decide in a couple of months that it's going to be spun out to whomever, and then it doesn't get spun out? So that's just my concern.
I think I'm hearing that the decision to spin it out is today. But I don't have the recommendations in front of me.
Sorry, the recommendation is that.
Did you find them on the screen? Are they on the screen?
Oh, yeah.
That's
Number 3 there.
Okay. Councillor Seegers.
Thank you. Under strategic plan, you talk about financial implications, and this is with regards to the Summer Music Series and Canada Day family events. And you talk about a contract valued at approximately $25,500. How does that compare to what we spent this past year for the Summer Music Series and for Canada Day? And
It's almost it's a little bit of a bump up for the producer fee, because as we heard back from the family events coordinator this year, the contract was valued at $1,000. Over 200 hours was put in by that person. It's clear that it needed to be a little bit higher of a fee in order to make it realistic for someone to do. So there is a slight increase that way, but the Summer Music Series itself is staying at the same amount, which is approximately $16,500. The costs for the actual production of this, the family events, is staying the same. So really it's just about a $1,500 increase in the amount that the events. So instead of getting $1,000, they'll be getting $2,500.
So the cost for the events at on Family Day was only $3,500?
No, it's.
I'm just wondering.
Sorry,
I'm just wanting to make sure these numbers are right and how they came together. Because if you're saying 20,000 and it's 16,500, but part of that 16,500 was for the producer. I don't clearly follow the numbers.
No, that's okay. If I have done the numbers wrong, I would like someone to call me out on that. That's okay. This year it was approximately $7,000 to do the family events, and 1,000 of that was the producer's fee. So it was 6,000 programming budget and 1,000 fee. Summer Music Series is 16,500. That's everything included. And then I'm suggesting that we add 1,500 to the producer fee. So
you want 19,000 at the end of the day? Sounds like 1,000, 1,500 is 2,500, and 16,500 for the other one.
Except the 16,500 also covers the producer for that event.
Yeah, 16,500 is the.
Right. So because I don't know the breakdown of that, I can't see whether or not the number of the 25,500 actually will cover off everything. I just want to make sure you've got the number correctly.
I think so, because what I have is 16,500 for the music series, 7,000 for the family events, plus an additional 1,500, which brings us to 25,500. Yes. Look to the accountants.
In the recommendations, you're not actually, I mean, this is giving us order of magnitude at this point. So
Yeah.
the recommendations don't actually refer to this, but
No.
so going forward, you can actually confirm the numbers, you know, to make sure inside the
Yeah,
budget.
we
that
would,
comes
yeah,
forward.
that's just it. We would still have to take this to the 2019 budget in order to you know, I'm just sort of guesstimating this, well, not a guesstimate, this is, you know, estimating what it is, but it still has to be approved within the 2019 budget.
Yeah. I mean, was it Kim?
Yes.
Yes, she did a fabulous job.
Yes.
And she did put in a ton of hours for
Yes.
that. It was reflected in the community. They loved what happened.
Yeah.
But she was seriously underpaid.
Yes.
Yes. So, I mean, I just want to make sure that we've covered off what we need to cover off in this, I guess is what I'm saying. Okay, so just revisit the numbers, make sure we're okay.
Yeah, and it's something that perhaps, you know, I did ask, you know, what might be a more reasonable amount.
Right.
I think too that for her, not only was she new to the community, but new to the event. And so there was also some extra work that needed to be done just to familiarize herself with it, that hopefully, you know, second time around, it's you know, it's a little bit easier, maybe a little bit less hours. It might not be her doing it though.
Right, that's right.
So,
particularly if we're putting both together, it may not be her.
Right.
Or, you know, it might
It's
be somebody totally new to all of it again.
yeah.
Okay.
Okay,
Thank
we
you.
can move along here. Can we go back to the recommendations? We can have those on the screen. It seems to me that there are two, production might be a general category, but they're two very different events. And you think of the family event at Canada Day is organizing a far broader set of activities and therefore people involved, and the music festival or the summer music series is a much more confined and narrow. So do you think the same skills are, or will this shift the tendering on that as well? Or would one person subcontract?
They could subcontract. We typically do allow that in a contract such as this. I do think that a person who has the skill set to do the summer music series could also do the family events. There is sort of a standard set of, we know there's going to be a bouncy castle. We know there's going to be pony rides. There's some things that we don't need someone to reinvent the family events component for us every year, in the way that someone who does the music series, I think, really does need to think every year about the performers that are coming. So the stage performance section of the family events is what gets sort of reinvented every year, if you will. And so I think that would translate nicely, whereas taking care of the other activities that happen in the park, it's more of just having that point person to be in charge of managing all those services and contracts for the different vendors.
But those are a lot of points.
It is.
A lot of contracts. And I see this, no reflection on how the summer music series is done, but having a background in music, I can see it being a much more leisurely activity in terms of knowing the sound person, knowing the stages there, and you know the range of musicians. So you're on the phone, you recreate it every year, but it's a more people look after themselves once they know they're coming to play.
Well, we'll try it. It's a bit of an experiment. This year was a bit of an experiment, getting someone to do the family events, and we realized what the challenges are. Yeah. This was the solution I thought might work better for us next year, and I might be coming to you in another year and saying we need to try something different.
Or you might find and say that you couldn't get a tender. You come and say it has to be broken up because it didn't work.
It's possible. Yeah.
That's fine. Okay. Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Lutz. Any further discussion of recommendations 2, 3, or 4? Councillor Mueller.
Yeah, I just wanted to pitch my idea again about the coming in with a baseline for support for the vast variety. Some of these events that we're doing have a much higher budget than the others. And that's due to peculiarities of history, and we don't need to get into that. But if we want to encourage new events to come forth from the community, if we want to make sure that all the events are supported in more of an equal way, we're going to have to really open up that discussion, because it needs to be had. We have equivalent events, some receiving $20,000 to $60,000 worth of district support, taxpayer support, and others not even receiving $800 in a year. So we have to deal with that.
Councillor Inkster?
Yeah, it's kind of, in its way, we've seen over the last few years some event creep. We've seen a lot of new events, and we just have to find the financial wherewithal, I think, to deal with it all. As it looks right now, I can't support, if it's being brought forward as 2, 3, and 4, I can't support 3, because I don't know where that's going, so I won't be supporting it. And I sure hope, with all our discussion and seeing all the good work in the presentation by Siobhan, that one day we talk about night market again. I mean, it's completely dropped off our radar, yet we're doing a lot of other things, which is great. It's great for our community, but there's something that we haven't brought back up that was also good for our community. But also had a bouncy castle. So,
okay, in your first comment, item 4 is supposed to look after item 3. Item 4 will be talking to the Sunshine Coast Conservation Association about ocean stays, so that there will be some direct community pickup. That's what is intended.
Oh,
just so that's what's intended. You may not agree with it.
Yeah. Okay. I know. I saw that. And I won't be supporting it because of the 3 in the middle. Because I don't think I know what's intended, but I'm not sure if that'll work that way. There might be. Anything could happen. They may not be able to pick it up with their staff. It may go into our CIP grant pool. It may not be money for it. Councillor Lutz may not like Ocean's Day. You know, I don't know.
And
so.
Councillor Mueller may have more time next year, so he'll just take it on as an event organizer.
Yeah, he might, but he might not. So there's too many
There's
ifs.
lots of ifs.
Yeah.
Lots of ifs.
Yeah.
Okay. Recommendations are in front of it. We've had some discussion, some in favor, one clearly opposed at the moment. Any other discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. With some reflection to staff on the reasons for the objections in terms of making sure there's really clear communications with the community, and also developing in your broader report from before this notion of how we can address an equitable approach to the many festivals, which all do good work, especially if there's major inequities in terms of how they're doing. Moving on to the last item of the day, and thanks everyone for their patience, though I've lost most of mine. It's 6.7, just because I'm getting hungry. Quite hungry. 6.7, solid waste collection and disposal bylaw amendment. Report, first a motion to receive the report from the manager. Thank you, Councillor Wright and Councillor Seegers. All those in favor. And this is one that Councillor Shanks will recuse himself from.
Good, thank you.
And given that there's nothing after this and no in cameras, I guess we won't have to call you back for the adjournment. So he was getting his coat, not just going into the side room. We'll see you this evening. It's been carried, actually. So we'll turn then to Mr. Curry to give us the report.
Thank you, Chairman and Committee. My report today brings forward the committee's recommended changes from the July 3rd meeting for the solid waste collection and disposal bylaw. The changes add a provision for qualifying homeowners be provided a refund of solid waste fees up to $216, dependent of qualifying for the additional homeowner grant and the unused grant funds available for those homes. Today we are requesting that the bylaw be moved forward to Council for first 3 readings, and that the committee decide if the change will be applied to the 2018 solid waste fees already paid. We believe the change will impact approximately 35 properties with a value of $4,000 to $5,000 per year. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions of the report, Councillor Seegers?
Thank you. Page 143. Right underneath the table, it says that the committee could recommend that only property owners who are eligible to claim the additional homeowner grant for any reason other than age can receive the solid waste services at a reduced rate. I think that's what we're looking at implementing, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so if we actually go to the bylaw, 2A, 2A2, is that correct?
No.
Okay,
No, this was my report to the last committee meeting, and the
Yes.
committee agreed to go with the regional district's proposal, which was anyone who's eligible for the additional grant for any reason, which would include age.
so then that will not be only the number that Mr. Curry referred to. How many people will it actually impact?
I know it was still about 35. What we looked at was the number of properties that claimed a grant greater than 770, but less than 1045. And there was 35 properties in there with an unused portion of around, at that time, about $4,300. So
So
if
it's
you claim
only-
1045, then you wouldn't be eligible for this based on the value of your home.
So we're trying to capture those people who had never paid this before because their income was so low, but they did have room in their homeowner grant. Others had actually already exceeded their homeowner grant, both portions, and so they were paying taxes, and they would have been paying the full municipal
Right,
pickup.
but what I'm saying is, I don't believe that this clause, I mean, in how I'm reading it, this does not make that distinction. If we look at eligible property, means property that is liable to property taxation and owned by a person entitled to receive the additional homeowner's grant in respect to that property. That's anybody who gets any additional homeowner grant for age, for disability, for whatever. It doesn't distinguish between the two, which I'm hearing we are distinguishing, are we not?
No, everyone's eligible, but the maximum waiver is $216 and only also to a maximum of how much unused additional grant you have. So there's 3 criteria if you want. So anyone who gets additional grant could apply if they don't use their full homeowner grant, and the maximum is still $216, which is the garbage fee.
And following the SCRD model, it would include an age. It would not just be people under 65. That's the difference.
Yes.
But it would still only be about 35 people and $4,000 to $5,000 maximum.
So you'd be over 65, or disabled, or a veteran.
Right.
That's right. So it would be a senior's grant as well, possibly.
It could be, yes.
And I think that's the difference that Councillor
Yes.
Segers wasn't sure that we were including seniors, but
I
that
didn't,
was
I
the
didn't believe we
intention.
were in the intention of what we were looking at moving forward. I thought we were looking at people who got a grant.
Our discussion started with the one that
Yes.
you're thinking, but by the time we referred to the SCRD model and what we actually moved as a committee was the broader one, with the understanding that it would apply to so very few people. And if it actually does apply to them and they're over 65, they're in as much of need of this help as anyone else. It's a very small number.
Okay.
That was what, yeah.
Okay,
I
as long as-
understand
yeah.
that. We had most of our discussion about the other.
Yes.
About the other.
Yeah, and I wasn't clear about what, the clause 2A5, whatever it was referring to
Absolutely.
in the report. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and it's making the report and the bylaw jive, which was, because now the bylaw's coming back based on our discussion, but the report is the old report.
Right, it talks about paragraphs 2.1 and 2.2 of Schedule A of the, okay, thanks.
That's the 20 July report. So this will help those most in need, especially those who were surprised by the municipal charges being different than a municipal tax. Can I have somebody move the 2 recommendations? Thank you, Councillor Segers and Councillor Mueller. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor? That's carried. Yes, and a follow-up, just for clarity.
How will we get this information out to property owners that it will impact? Because not everybody will necessarily be aware that we're doing this and that they're eligible for this, which could impact deferred taxes for next year if these fees aren't paid.
Probably through our communication manager, we will do some sort of campaign to let people know. And then with our insert, when the bills go out, we'll make sure it's reflected there. Ultimately, it will be hopefully on future homeowners to be aware that this is an option for them.
And this year, we were keeping a list of those who had come in with concerns, I think?
The intention was to, if someone wants to call us, we can check to see if they're eligible for it. And I'm assuming, based on the recommendation, that if you wants to extend it retroactively, we could go to the end of this year and say you've got till December 31st to retroactively apply for this.
No media here, but it would be good to get out in the media. But anything else on this? Then I look for a motion to adjourn. Thank you. All in favor? We're all in favor. It's 20 to 4. We'll be back here at 5 minutes to 7 for this evening.